Chapter 201, Part 1. It seems that you should have reached an agreement? Seeing the smiles on Scott's faces, Chen Luo asked with a smile. It's been negotiated. There's no problem on our side. Scott nodded and replied. Fury on the side also spoke at the right time. Your requests are very reasonable. I think we have no reason to refuse. It turns out that before he came here, Fury was already prepared to suffer a lot. After all, this time they had to ask the other party to take action. As long as it did not exceed their bottom line, it was worth paying something. However, when he came here and heard the requirements mentioned by the other party, Fury immediately understood what the other party was thinking. He has always been very clear about the conflict between the mutant family and humans. Although he himself has no other opinions about mutants, how can his own thoughts be compared with those of all mankind? So for mutants in the situation, he is also powerless. Especially after the current apocalypse incident, the conflict between humans and mutants has undoubtedly intensified. If it weren't for the terrifying existence of apocalypse weighing on humans, the situation of mutants would have become even more difficult. Even if Chen Luo and the others agree to take action, they can finally defeat apocalypse. Once the threat of apocalypse is gone, he himself also knows what humans will do to the mutant family. Therefore, in order to ensure the safety of the mutant family, the requirements made by Scott seem reasonable and reasonable. If humans knew that the people who saved them were also mutants, their attitude towards the mutants group would probably ease a lot. As for the other party's desire to establish a mutant country, this is not difficult to handle. It just requires a nod from the council to acknowledge 570, and it does not require them to pay anything. For such a request, Furue has enough confidence. There is no reason for the council to disagree. But what he didn't expect was that, apart from making demands on the situation of the mutant clan, they had no idea of benefiting themselves at all. This surprised Fury, and at the same time, he also had an impression of Scott and others. Get well. In fact, to be honest, after hearing the other party's request for help, Chen Luo didn't think about asking for some benefits. However, this was not the era of superheroes, and there were very few good things that could attract him. So and after thinking about it carefully, Chen Luo simply gave up the idea. At worst, he would just treat it as a favor to this black braised egg. Anyway, he believes that he will have to deal with this black braised egg in the future. Now that their relationship can be handled better, it may be of some use in the future. With this consideration, Chen Luo did not embarrass the other party too much, and quickly reached an agreement with him. Then it's settled. I'll leave it to you all on the apocalypse side. After saying this, Fury didn't know what he was thinking. He turned to look at Chen Luo and asked, Chen, I want to ask, are you sure you can deal with the useless ones with your strength? Hearing this question, Chen Luo had a half smile on his face and said, I think we can only know this question after we fight. But I do want to know, if I can't deal with apocalypse, do you have any other backup plans? Is it possible that Director Fury knows other strong people who can surpass apocalypse? Hearing this, Fury's face was slightly startled, and then he quickly reacted, showing a somewhat stiff smile, and said calmly, Definitely not. If I knew such an existence, I probably wouldn't be here today. After hearing his explanation, Chen Luo nodded slightly and said nothing more. But at this moment, his heart suddenly became more active, because at this moment, he suddenly remembered something. That is the black braised egg in front of me. It seems that he really knows a person whose power is stronger than Apocalypse. Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers, a super strong man who can compete with the overlord of the universe Thanos, is also Fury's best friend when he was young, before he left the Earth. Once left Fury with a pager as a way to contact him. So as long as Fury is willing, he can summon this Captain Marvel to return to Earth at any time. With the strength of the opponent, I am afraid that Apocalypse is really no match. Since the other party has the ability to deal with Apocalypse, why come to them? The brain was running fast, and soon, Chen Luo found the answer. Although Captain Marvel is powerful, don't forget that the Apocalypse camp still has a professor. With such a spiritual master sitting in charge, it would be fun if Captain Marvel was controlled by the psychic ability during the battle against Apocalypse. Got it. By that time, with the power of Apocalypse and Captain Marvel, this combination will be able to conquer the world. It will be difficult for humans to have a chance to make a comeback, so Fury will not use it unless it is in desperate situations. This last trump card. There are still 3 days left before the deadline given by Apocalypse. If Chen Luo and the others can successfully defeat Apocalypse within this period, it will be great. If they also fail, then he can only choose to call Captain Marvel. After understanding the other party's thoughts, his eyes flashed, and he suddenly had a plan in his heart. There is no doubt that the other party's worries are indeed possible. If Captain Marvel is really controlled, with the other party's strength, the difficulty of destroying Apocalypse will undoubtedly be greatly increased. Definitely, there are ways to defend against telepathy ability. After all, he has a special helmet made by Eric himself. As long as he wears it, he can block Professor Gua's history. But this is also not safe. Even with this helmet, you have to face Apocalypse after all. How many abilities this ancient mutant has is unknown. If there is something like psychokinesis, You can directly attack the opponent without paying attention. Take off the helmet, and the end result will be the same. So now Chen Luo has the same idea as Fury. This time he also plans to personally experience the strength of Apocalypse. If he really can't beat it, it won't be too late to call someone else. Even if he can't beat the opponent, he won't really die anyway. So Chen Luo naturally has nothing to be afraid of. Just as Chen Luo was thinking about this, Fury's voice sounded again. By the way, Chen, since you are the king of your vampire clan, you shouldn't be unfamiliar with Dracula, right? Hearing this, Chen Luo subconsciously raised his eyebrows and looked at the other party. Director Nick Fury, what do you mean? It's nothing. Fury smiled and explained, I think you have all seen the strength of Apocalypse. Do we need more power to deal with them? So I think, for this operation, we'd better invite the other party to take action together, so that we will be more confident. What do you think? Chen Luo. After a moment of silence, Chen Luo slowly shook his head and said, I'm afraid it won't do anything. I know Dracula's strength very well. He is indeed very strong, but don't forget that he has a fatal weakness. Huh? What weakness? Seeing the other party's bewildered expression, Chen Luo smiled and said, Director Nick Fury, you forgot that vampires are afraid of sunlight, right? This has a weakness. Dracula will not leave his territory at will. So if you want to invite him to act together, I'm afraid it's a bit ill-considered. Chen Luo definitely lied to him. In fact, the main reason why he didn't want Dracula to come over was because he was afraid that the other party would find out what happened between him and Qin. If this matter was known to the other party, his future father-in-law might want to fight him desperately. So no matter what, he couldn't let the two of them meet. Upon hearing this, Fury's expression froze and he reacted immediately. He really hasn't considered this issue, but he can't blame him. After all, there is Chen Luo, an example who is not afraid of sunlight. He even thought that the vampire family had overcome the weakness of sunlight. Now it seems that he thinks too much. Too much. Chapter 201, Part 2. Although he is also a king, since he has a fatal weakness such as fear of sunlight, the role Dracula can play is undoubtedly much reduced. Even if he can really invite the other party to act together, he may still be delayed in the end. If this affects Chen Luo and the others, it will be more than worth the loss. Thinking of this, Fury also decisively gave up his previous idea of inviting Dracula. However, since Dracula did not join, he was even more unsure about whether Chen Luo and the others could deal with the Apocalypse side. After all, in terms of king-level combat power, there were at least 4 of them, and now there was only Chen Luo here. If someone can compete with it, such a comparison does not look like it has a chance of winning. Is it really necessary to use that method? As Chen Luo guessed, after seeing the power of Apocalypse, he once wanted to call Captain Marvel back to Earth. Fury may have great confidence in the opponent's strength, but just when he was about to take action, he suddenly remembered that Apocalypse seemed to have a powerful person with psychic ability like the Professor. If Carol really arrived and was controlled by the Professor, then human beings would really it's over. So after thinking about it carefully, he temporarily put aside the idea and wanted to let Chen Luo and the others try it first. It would definitely be best if he could win, but if even Chen Luo couldn't fight against Apocalypse, then he would have no choice. Nodding, Fury said nothing more. After reaching an agreement with Chen Luo and the others, he turned around and left, got on the helicopter, and went back to report to his superiors. After the other party left, Qin turned her head to look at Chen Luo, with worried eyes and said, Chen, we? Before he could finish speaking, he was interrupted by Chen Luo waving his hand. He glanced at the crowd and said calmly, let's think about this issue tomorrow. Don't we have 3 days left? Don't worry, we can always find a way. It's getting late now, let's go to bed early. We'll think about this issue again tomorrow. Hearing this, Scott and the others looked at each other, nodded helplessly, and agreed, while Chen Luo and others were resting. On the other side, in the Egyptian mainland, in the city of Apocalypse, Apocalypse also started its next plan. Calling everyone to come before him, Apocalypse looked at Eric and said, Eric, the next step is up to you. Hearing this, other people's eyes turned to Eric one after another. Thinking of Apocalypse's next plan, several people's faces were faintly excited. Give it to me. Eric nodded slightly, without any hesitation. His body slowly suspended in the sky, turned around and flew towards the gate. Go, child. Let mankind see and see our mutant calendar. Use your power to bring this world back to the track it should have. Our era will begin from this moment on. Eric flew into the sky and came to 100 meters. It slowly stopped after a distance of about 100 meters. Lowering his head and looking at the ground under his feet, Eric's eyes were extremely indifferent, and he stretched out his hands calmly. The next moment, ability is fully activated. In an instant, an unprecedented terrifying magnetic field spread from Eric's body, rushing towards the surroundings. Accompanied by a low growl, the veins on Eric's forehead popped up, and his whole body trembled, obviously using all his strength. With his full efforts, The magnetic field he created was spreading towards the entire planet at a speed visible to the naked eye, and finally completely enveloped the Earth. Immediately afterwards, under the influence of this magnetic field that enveloped the world, the iron elements buried deep underground in all the continental plates of the entire world were slowly attracted by the magnetic field and broke through the surface. Put the spread on the ground. Because the speed of advancement was slow enough, it did not cause a strong earthquake like before, but even so, the abnormal movement caused by Eric instantly caused countless people to have attention. Look, what's going on? Suddenly, in a city, a young man seemed to have suddenly discovered something. His face became a little frightened, and he pointed forward. 3. He said with a trembling tone. Awakened by the sound, everyone subconsciously turned their heads to take a look. However, when they saw clearly the direction the other party was pointing, they were all shocked, and their faces instantly became dull. What the hell is that? Following the direction in which everyone was looking, they could clearly see that at their feet, countless tiny black particles were rising from the ground and then floating towards the sky. Countless iron elements began to gather in the sky, and finally formed black torrents, suspended in the sky, dancing wantonly. Looking at the scene above the sky, someone's face finally changed drastically, as if he remembered something, and his eyes were full of horror, and he said, "Damn, this is Magneto's ability." After being reminded like this, everyone finally reacted. They couldn't help but recall the scene they saw on the live broadcast not long ago. In the scene, wasn't the other party controlling these gadgets and killing the human coalition forces wantonly? Could it be that we have the same fate? Seeing more and more black torrents in the sky, everyone's eyes were suddenly filled with fear. Run away. Damn it, I don't want to die yet. Is there no one who can stop him? Humanity is going to end. This world will also be destroyed. We can't escape it. Master Apocalypse, please, don't kill me. I am willing to surrender. Finally, everyone could no longer bear the fear in their hearts and fled in all directions. The next moment, the whole world became chaotic. At the same time, such anomalies have also been detected by military bases around the world. Look at the scenes on the screen. For a time, the entire base fell into silence. Chapter 202, Part 1. Damn it, what happened just now? In a huge amounts of military base, a middle-aged man who looked like an officer was staring at the screen in front of him. When he saw what happened on the screen, his face changed suddenly, and he looked very ugly. He was all too familiar with such a scene. Not long ago, his friend, the commander sent by the Eagle Sauce Kingdom to conquer Apocalypse, died under such an attack together with his 20,000 troops. It has only been a few hours now, and he actually saw such a scene again, which made him shocked and angry. Sir, it's bad. Tell me what happened. Sir, just now bases all over the world have sent intelligence, and this phenomenon has appeared in the sky above all cities. According to the analysis of intelligence personnel, this should be caused by Magneto's ability. Magneto? It's this guy again. What the hell is he trying to do? Does any of you know? The officer glanced around. Facing his question, the atmosphere was silent for a while, and then there was an exclamation. Sir, look quickly. Subconsciously looked along the screen that the other party was pointing at, but just looking at it, everyone froze in place for an instant. On the screen in front of everyone, the Kingdom of Gaul, located on the Champ de Mars, on the banks of the Seine River, the Eiffel Tower, a huge building that has stood for hundreds of years and is more than 300 meters high, is slowly emerging a layer of black particles, floating toward the sky. As these black particles became more and more, gradually, some pedestrians finally noticed the scene there and couldn't help but exclaimed, "What's that? What happened? Look, the Eiffel Tower seems to be disappearing." What? Under the gazes of countless people around, as the body of the tower gradually turned into countless tiny black particles, this building that has stood for hundreds of years is slowly disappearing from the eyes of the world. Although the speed of disappearing was very slow, an hour had passed since Magneto made his move. During this time, the spheres of this gigantic building with a height of hundreds of meters disappeared without a sound. At this speed, it would take less than a day for this iron tower to completely disappear. Looking at this scene on the screen, the officer's face became a little pale. His eyes looked a little panicked, and he couldn't help saying, "What the hell is going on? What's going on? What the hell is that damn mutant trying to do?" Just as he couldn't help roaring crazily, not far from him, there was a terrified voice suddenly. "Sir, the military experts from the White House have just received news. They say they already know what the Apocalypse side is doing." Hearing this, the officer immediately lifted his spirits, turned his head to look at the other party, and asked impatiently, "Speak quickly." "Yes." The other party responded, and then immediately began to explain. According to expert analysis, Magneto should be manipulating the global magnetic field to induce iron elements buried deep in the Earth's crust, thus causing such scenes to appear in the skies around the world. The officer nodded without saying a word, motioning for the other party to continue. In addition, the scene we just saw was because the magnetic field controlled by the opponent was too strong, which caused the magnetic field to force the exposed steel building to decompose the iron elements. This is also the reason why the Eiffel Tower began to disappear. After a pause, recalling the news that had just come from the White House, his face looked even more panicked. He swallowed, suppressed the panic in his heart, and said calmly, "Also, according to the judgment of experts, if this situation continues, in one day at most, Magneto will destroy all buildings in the world and turn human settlements into ruins. At that time, mankind will go back to the Bronze Age." Deathly silence. As soon as these words came out, there was no sound at all in the audience, and the faces of all the people present became dull, and they looked at each other with disbelief written all over their faces. Thinking of what the other party just said, at this moment, everyone could not help but picture the future of mankind. Their homes were completely destroyed, and all the weapons owned by mankind disappeared. From now on, there was no possibility of resistance. This world will also be completely controlled by mutants. Thinking of such a future, everyone was shocked, and their eyes were instantly filled with fear. How is this possible? How could the future of mankind become like that? No, we must stop him. That's right. Sir, we must attack Magneto again, and we can't let him continue like this. Otherwise, we humans will all be finished. Sir, give the order. We can't wait any longer. Looking at the angry crowd, the anger on the officer's face gradually subsided, and reason once again gained the upper hand. After a moment of silence, he asked, "You want to do something to Magneto? I ask you, will our weapons do him any harm? Aren't you afraid that our weapons will be used by the other party in turn and then attack us? You should have seen the previous battle, right? Do you think it is possible to fight against Magneto with our human strength?" Speaking of this, an imperceptible bleakness flashed in the officer's eyes. "But sir, even if we are not his opponents, we can't just give up like this." Looking at the people around him who still wanted to say something, the officer waved his hand. "No need to say more. Everything depends on what the White House thinks. Remember, we are soldiers. We just need to obey orders. Moreover, this crisis is not something we can solve. Attacking for no reason will only increase casualties in the end. You have all seen Magneto's ability. To be honest, are we really confident that we can defeat him? And besides him, don't forget that behind him, the apocalypse has not taken action yet. Perhaps only a true god can defeat such an enemy, right?" Hearing this, everyone fell into silence again. Through the series of pictures just now, they finally understood the horror of Magneto. It is the existence that can control the entire Earth's magnetic field, and it can destroy the living environment of human beings in one day, so that human beings can go back to the Bronze Age. Ability is no different than that of a god. Not to mention that in addition to Magneto, there is also an apocalypse whose strength may even be higher than him. Such a combination, they can't think of how to defeat it at all. Even when they thought about it, even if their nuclear weapons had not been destroyed, even if they used nuclear weapons, they might not be able to pose any threat to these two people. Instead, they might be controlled by the other party and used as a weapon to attack human beings. Arms. It has to be said that after Mutant broke through to level 5, it has truly touched the realm of the gods. If they are given enough time to grow, it is not impossible to destroy the entire planet, not to mention destroying the buildings on the surface. With their overwhelming strength, they couldn't find a way to defeat them at all. Thinking of this, the atmosphere here became stagnant again. Less than 2 hours after the incident, in the early morning of the second day after leaving Chen Luo and the others, Fury, who had just stepped off the helicopter, also received the news immediately. Immediately after hearing the news, his eyes began to shrink instantly, and then he quickly returned to the base, came to the monitoring screen, and looked at the elephants from all over the world. When he saw the long black dragons starting to gather in the sky everywhere, and the scene where steel buildings gradually began to disappear from time to time, Fury frowned instantly and his face became very solemn. When he thought about it, only one person could achieve this iconic scene, and apart from Magneto, who had just fought against him not long ago, there probably wouldn't be anyone else. Although he had known for a long time that the other party was powerful, the fact that it was so powerful was completely beyond his imagination. At the same time, he couldn't help but worry about whether Chen Luo and the others could really deal with each other. Chapter 202, Part 2. Is his ability actually able to cover this kind of range? If he really has this kind of strength, why haven't we seen him use it before? Maybe his ability has improved again. Based on the information he had received before, Fury naturally knew that Magneto's strength was at the level of a 4th-level mutant. Although his strength was indeed terrifying, it was definitely not to such an outrageous level. If in the past Magneto could only deal with one army at the same time, then now that the opponent's ability is fully activated, Fury realized deeply that with Eric's current ability, he might be able to single-handedly take on the whole world. With such an ability, even if Carol returns to Earth, will she really be able to resist it? After realizing this, Fury was shocked by Eric's strength. At the same time, he also felt a little unsure about the last card in his hand for the first time. With Magneto's current strength, I'm afraid it's not enough to describe it with a level 4 mutant. With a sigh, Fury suddenly had an idea in his mind. He looked at the screen in front of him in a daze and murmured, "Is it possible? He has become a level 5 mutant now?" If you say this, then turning him on is also. Magneto's strength is already so strong that people feel desperate. However, even with this strength, Magneto is still below Apocalypse. This shows that Apocalypse's strength is definitely better than the former. With such strength, Chen Luo and the others can really deal with it. Not to mention Chen Luo, even if he calls Carol back, with Carol's strength, can he really deal with these two mutants? Regarding this answer, if he had a certain degree of confidence before, now Fury is not sure after seeing the power displayed by Eric. If even they can't do it, what else can humans do to resist the other side? Is it possible that, as Apocalypse said, the world will enter the era of Apocalypse rule? By then, what will be the future of mankind? Thinking of this, Fury's heart began to sink rapidly. He said nothing and his face was terrifyingly solemn. Just when Fury was thinking about the future of mankind, the other side. After a night's rest, that is, immediately after Eric activated his ability, Chen Luo and Qin were in the room where Chen Luo, who was sleeping soundly, was suddenly awakened by a familiar voice. Ding! It has been detected that the world is about to be destroyed. Now open the option. Option 1. Solve the crisis of annihilation. Reward, a variant ability upgrade card, temporary. Option 2. Solve the crisis of extermination and massacre everyone in the Apocalypse camp, excluding Apocalypse. Reward, you can upgrade any ability level you have. Hearing the sound of the system, Chen Luo instantly woke up from his sleep, opened his eyes, subconsciously stood upright, and his eyes gleamed. Is there another choice? It has to be said that the choice this time came at the right time. Originally, he was not sure about how to fight against Apocalypse, but now that the system has a reminder, Chen Luo definitely hopes to find a solution to Apocalypse. Guaranteed to look forward to it, but when he saw the selected content released by the system this time, Chen Luo suddenly froze and subconsciously blinked. World Crisis? What does this mean? Just when he was a little confused, the next moment, the system's prompt sounded. After testing, Magneto is destroying all the buildings in the world. It will only take one day. The world will be turned into ruins, and human civilization will go back to the Bronze Age. What? Hearing this, Chen Luo's eyes contracted violently, and his heart shook violently. With his exclamation, Qin, who was still sleeping soundly beside him, was awakened instantly by Chen Luo, opened his eyes, looked at Chen Luo with some confusion and asked, "What's the matter, Chen? What happened?" After regaining his senses, Chen Luo quickly comforted the other party, and after he continued to rest, Chen Luo also began to think quickly. The current situation is already obvious. This crisis of annihilation should be caused by Eric. So if we want to solve this crisis, we can only stop Eric's actions. Although killing each other directly is the best way to prevent this crisis, but they have been together for the past 2 years, and they are considered friends, so Chen Luo does not want to kill Eric. What's more, there are professors in the Apocalypse camp, Mystique and their acquaintances. Now they are all controlled by Apocalypse to become what they are now, and there may not be no chance of recovery in the future, so he has already thought about it long ago. This time he will do your best to help them out of Apocalypse's grip. Since a decision has already been made, Chen Luo has no choice but to choose the first option this time. However, when Chen Luo saw the reward content of the first choice, Chen Luo was also distressed. Variant ability upgrade card? This thing can only improve the mutant's ability? Then what's the use of my coming? You must know that the abilities on Chen Luo are all due to his skills and abilities. He is not a mutant, so in this way, he will undoubtedly not be able to use this reward. It can only be used by other mutants, etc. Suddenly, Chen Luo seemed to think of something. The light in his eyes flashed, and his heart suddenly became a little excited. At the moment, he silently said in his heart without any hesitation, "System, I choose the first one." Chapter 203, Part 1. The reason why he made a choice so quickly was because Chen Luo suddenly had a new idea. In his opinion, if this variant ability upgrade card really has the same effect as he imagined, then he might really win against Apocalypse this time. And he has already thought about the purpose of this upgrade card, and he will not choose anyone other than Charles who has telepathy ability. The reason is also very simple. The fundamental reason why Charles was controlled by Apocalypse before was that there was too much difference in mental power between the two. But if Chen Luo used this upgrade card to upgrade Charles's ability, he would be promoted to 5 in a short time. After leveling mutant, will this happen again? If Charles can be promoted to a 5th level mutant, then it is conceivable that with the improvement of his telepathy ability, his mental power will also get a surge, and it is not surprising that he will eventually surpass Apocalypse. Once his mental power surpasses Apocalypse, will Apocalypse's control over him still work? In Chen Luo's mind, by then, Charles will be very likely to be able to break free from control. If, as he imagined, Charles breaks free from Apocalypse's control and regains his freedom. Then with his ability, Apocalypse will definitely bring huge amounts of trouble. After all, telepathy ability is one of the most difficult abilities to defend against in the world. So far, there are only two ways to block telepathy ability. One is that the target's mental power can surpass the ability, and the other is that the target can possess Eric's special ability, the Resist Telepathy Ability Helmet. Now that Apocalypse's mental power has surpassed that of Charles, and now that Charles is under his control, it is conceivable that Weiqi will not think of wearing a helmet to resist the attack of telepathy ability at this time. And this is undoubtedly his opportunity. As long as he can take the opportunity to let Charles break free from control and reach the height of a 5th-level mutant, then with his ability, he will very likely control Apocalypse and lose his ability to resist. Until then, there is hope for solving Apocalypse. Thinking of this, Changji suddenly became a little excited. After careful consideration several times, and the more he thought about it, the more he felt that his method was very feasible. Chen Luo suddenly made a decision. Not long after, Chen Luo called Scott and the others together again, and then began to tell them about his plan. Everyone should have understood the situation outside now. So our top priority now is to solve the troubles caused by Eric first. Only by stopping Eric from continuing to use ability now can this global disaster be stopped. After waking up from sleep, everyone also learned about what is happening in the world today from Hank's monitoring equipment. After knowing what Eric has done now, they were all shocked. I didn't expect Eric's ability to grow to such an extent. As the only scientist in the academy, Han Shu naturally understood the horror of Eric's ability best. He can actually control the magnetic field of the entire planet. With such an ability, I am afraid that destroying the world is not a difficult task for him. No, we must stop him as soon as possible, otherwise the cities inhabited by humans all over the world will collapse and become ruins in a short time. By then, human civilization will definitely have huge amounts of regression. That's right. It seems that we have to act immediately. After all, I don't want to be a primitive man in the future. Scott on the side also said anxiously. Looking at the somewhat anxious faces of several people, Chen Luo nodded. It's okay to act now, but there is one problem we still need to consider. What is the problem? Several people asked quickly. Facing everyone's gaze, Chen Luo slowly opened his mouth and expressed his worries. If I face Eric, I am sure of winning, but before that, how should we get close to him? I think we need at least one means of transportation. It's easy. After hearing this, a smile suddenly appeared on Hank's face and he said, under the academy, there is still the plane I built. With it, we will be able to go to the 1st level soon. This is not enough. As soon as he finished speaking, Chen Luo shook his head and denied it. After a pause, Chen Luo continued, Hank, don't forget, Eric's ability can control the magnetic field. If your plane cannot shield the external magnetic field, I'm afraid we won't get close. Perceived by Eric. It would be fine if it was just Eric, but there is Apocalypse behind him. If we alert the other party in advance, it might be difficult for us to stop Eric. Chen Luo naturally has his own considerations about taking transportation. In fact, with his ability, he can quickly reach his destination by teleporting. But having said that, it would be fine if Eric is the only enemy. What he has to face now but the entire camp on the Apocalypse side. You know, he has no confidence now when facing Apocalypse alone. If he overexerts himself in the battle with Eric, his chances of winning will undoubtedly be even smaller. So the best choice for him now is to take Qin and the others with him and take transportation to the destination. In this way, his consumption can be reduced to the greatest extent, and at the same time, he can face other people in the Apocalypse camp, including Scott and others. People can also help stop it. As long as they can get close to each other without Eric noticing, Chen Luo is sure to subdue the opponent in an instant. If everything goes well, then after receiving the reward, it will be time for him to make a comeback. Regarding the next plan, Chen Luo thought very clearly, but unfortunately, the most important means of transportation was not available, which gave Chen Luo a slight headache. Now there is less than a day before the world turns into ruins. In such a short period of time, where can he find transportation that can isolate the magnetic field? If there was really no other way, then he could only take Qin and the others and use teleportation to move forward. Everyone thought hard for a while, but seeing that they still couldn't come up with any solution, Chen Luo sighed helplessly and was about to speak. However, just as he opened his mouth, suddenly, a familiar phone ring rang from him. Subconsciously picking up the phone, Chen Luo was slightly startled when he saw the contact displayed on it. After clicking to connect, Chen Luo asked curiously, Tony, what's wrong? What do you want from me? Chen, you guy, haven't you come back from your trip yet? Damn it, haven't you seen what's happening outside now? On the other end of the phone, Tony's anxious voice sounded. Chen Luo. After hearing the other party's words, Chen Luo suddenly remembered that he hadn't told the other party the news of his return. I'm afraid Tony still thinks that he is now all over the world. God. Oh, I forgot to tell you. I've been back long ago. On the other end of the phone, Upon hearing Chen Luo's answer, Tony's anxious face immediately calmed down, and he exhaled, "Thank God. So you're still in New York now?" "Definitely," Chen Luo replied, and then asked again, "Why, look at you. Do you have something to do with me?" "Congratulations, you guessed right. I really need your help." Speaking of this, Tony suddenly seemed to remember something, and asked impatiently, "Chun, tell me the truth. Are you sure about dealing with that Magneto?" "Huh? What do you mean? Do you mean you want to deal with him? Aren't you talking nonsense?" Tony rolled his eyes helplessly. "If I let that guy succeed, I will have to be a primitive man in the future. Is it possible that you still like to make clothes out of leaves?" "Stop talking about this, Chen. You answer my question first." Hearing the hasty voice of the other party, Chen Luo also understood the other party's thoughts now. He paused suddenly, then nodded lightly and replied, "I am definitely sure about this. Actually, I want to deal with him now, but it is a pity that we still lack a means of transportation. After all, you know about Magneto's ability. If there is no means to shield the magnetic field, it may be difficult for us to get close to each other." Chapter 203, Part 2. Hearing this, Tony's eyes lit up instantly, and he said hastily, "Didn't you say it earlier? I have a solution for this." "Huh?" Chen Luo was refreshed instantly and quickly asked, "Tony, what do you mean by that? Could it be that you have such a means of transportation?" "That's definitely." Tony's triumphant voice sounded. "Did you forget that I said 2 years ago that I want to develop a tool that can freely pass through Skull Island?" "I definitely remember." Hearing this, Chen Luo rolled his eyes and complained, "I don't know who said that it can be done in a few months." Ahem. There was an embarrassing cough, and after a while, Tony's voice came from the other side of the phone again. "This is not important. Anyway, after 2 years of research, I have already made the finished product. You've caught up. The plane I designed has the function of shielding the magnetic field." Speaking of this, Tony's voice suddenly became a little excited, and he said incessantly, "In order to deal with the bad weather outside Skull Island, I started thinking about how to solve it 2 years ago. In order to withstand the hurricane on the sea, the material of the aircraft must be hard enough. But this is not the most important thing. The most important thing is that the sea area is covered with dark clouds all the year round. So I also need to consider the possibility of the aircraft being struck by lightning. Risk. And this anti-magnetic field device is my solution. If this device is activated, the aircraft will be able to isolate all external magnetic fields. In this way, the aircraft will seem to be invisible from nature, and it will never attract lightning to fall on our heads. With it, we can freely enter and exit Skull Island from now on. Originally, I wanted to notify you as soon as the aircraft was manufactured, but I didn't expect such a thing to happen now. It seems that we need to push back the only way to go to Skull Island. Now let's solve the immediate problem first. Let's do this." "Great. Tony, you are such a genius." Hearing such good news from the other party, Chen Luo was overjoyed and couldn't help but praise. "That's definitely. Nothing can stop me. A genius." Regarding Chen Luo's praise, Tony accepted it without hesitation and said triumphantly. Chen Luo also didn't expect that he was having a headache about the transportation, but the next moment Tony helped him solve the trouble, and he became very excited at the moment. "Then it's settled. I'll go to your side later." "No problem. I'll wait for you." After hanging up the phone, Chen Luo looked at everyone and said with a smile, "We don't need to worry about the problem of transportation. Someone has already taken care of it for us." Hearing this, everyone was startled for a moment, and then a gleam of joy appeared on their faces. Los Angeles, Tony's seaside villa. After hanging up the phone, he began to wait anxiously. Through the huge amounts of transparent window, Tony could clearly see that on the sea level, not far from him, a series of imperceptible black particles slowly floated into the air from the sea surface, and then formed long black dragons suspended in the air, winding and circling. Although there are no other movements, it still gives people a sense of fear. Not only the sea level, the Zhao, now even the exposed steel parts of the villa where he is now have begun to turn into particles and dissipate. If this trend continues, it may not be long before it will gradually affect the entire villa. Damn, this kind of thing will happen. It seems that anti-magnetic field devices must be installed in the villa in the future. Otherwise, if there is another attack like this, I'm afraid my house will be destroyed. In the past 2 years, Tony has been immersed in the study of his means of transportation. He even seldom goes to the parties he usually attends. In order to quickly create a means of transportation that can freely pass through Skull Island, he hasn't seen him for so long. I also miss that big guy King Kong a little bit. Unexpectedly, in the past 2 years, not long after his aircraft was produced, such a series of things suddenly happened, from the Apocalypse Declaration, the Coalition Crusade, to the current crisis of annihilation, which made him dizzy. It was through this series of events that Tony finally realized the horror of the mutant group. He looked out of the window, and his face looked even more condensed than the naked eye. Mutant. Just as he was thinking about something, the next moment, behind him, The air suddenly began to vibrate, and then, the figures of Chen Luo and his party appeared in the room instantly, leaving Tony completely in time to react. Tony, here I come. Hearing Chen Luo's voice, Tony's heart skipped a beat, and he turned around quickly. When he saw Chen Luo, Chen and others suddenly appear in the living room. He stared even more, his face full of disbelief. Chen, you bastard. How did you come here so soon? Could it be that you bastard can still teleport? Huh? I can't tell, Tony. You're pretty smart. You can guess, right? Chen Luo raised his eyebrows at the other party and said 7 with a smile on his face. Chapter 204, Part 1. Not only Tony, but also Chen and others who were brought along by Chen Luo were looking at him in shock, their eyes full of disbelief. Chen, did you really use your teleportation ability to bring us here just now? Because time was tight, Chen Luo simply didn't want to waste too much time. So he took a few people with him, used the teleportation ability, and rushed towards Tony. With the help of the magical skill of teleportation, Chen Luo and his team successfully arrived at their destination in only about half an hour. Chen and the others were all confused about Chen Luo's ability and looked at Chen Luo with doubts in their eyes. Don't worry about these details. The most important thing for us now is to solve Apocalypse first. Waving his hands casually, Chen Luo didn't explain much. He turned to look at Tony, whom he hadn't seen for a long time, with a smile on his lips. Long time no see, Tony. He walked up and hugged his old friend, then punched his chest and said with some admiration, I didn't expect that we haven't seen each other for so long. You look no different from 2 years ago. Tisi. Hearing this, Tony rolled his eyes subconsciously and said helplessly, it would be fine if someone else said this, but when it comes from a vampire like you, why do I feel so wrong? Compared to you, a guy who doesn't age, I'm afraid I'll be considered an old man in a few years. Haha. Chen Luo laughed, patted the other party's shoulder and said, it's not easy to stay young. As long as you come to me, I will transform you into a vampire. I will guarantee that you will have eternal youth. Come on. I think being a human is pretty good. Hearing Chen Luo's words, although Tony was a little reluctant in his words, judging from his current expression, it was obvious that he was very satisfied with Chen Luo's promise, and even the corners of his eyes had a smile that couldn't be hidden. Oh, you really don't think about it? Aren't you worried that after more than 10 years you won't even be able to attend parties? You know, there is still a lot of good life waiting for you outside. This? Tony might not care much about other things, but when talking about this, a trace of obvious hesitation immediately appeared on his face, so forget it, since it is a matter for the future. Let's talk about it later. Speaking of this, Tony smiled freely and said, maybe I will be too old to move in the future, and I will really ask for your help. 230-inch haha, easy to say. As long as you come to me, I will help you. While the two were chatting with smiles on their faces, behind Chen Luo, when they heard what Chen Luo said to Tony, as the only two beauties in the team, Chen and Aurora suddenly felt sad. It tightened for a moment, and then a strong desire could not help but arise. Eternal youth. These short 5 words can be said to be extremely lethal to the two of them. Although the two of them are now in their peak state in terms of appearance and figure, and as mutants, their bodies age slower than ordinary people, but even so, the two of them could not stop their bodies from aging step by step. So it was at this moment that the two of them suddenly remembered Chen Luo the fact of being a vampire. If there is anything about vampires that they envy the most, it is undoubtedly their long life and eternal youth. Definitely, it is not that there are no such beings in the mutant family at this point, such as Sabretooth and Wolverine. Mutants with a powerful self-healing ability also possess this ability. But it is a pity that Chen and Aurora do not have this ability. Thinking that in more than 10 or 20 years, Chen Luo will still be like now, able to stay young forever, but they have to watch themselves step by step aging, they are a little shuddering. Maybe, is there another way? Thinking of this, the eyes of the two involuntarily fixed on Chen Luo. Definitely, Chen Luo didn't understand what they were thinking now. After reminiscing with Tony for a while, Chen Luo brought him to Chen and the others and started the introduction. Come on, Tony, let me introduce you. This is Jean Grey, my girlfriend. This is Aurora, Hank, and Scott. Nice to meet you all. His eyes glanced at Chen and others. Others were fine, but when he saw Hank with obvious features, Tony couldn't help being surprised. Hey, guys, you look really good. Division. As early as the reminiscing with Chen Luo had already briefly talked about everyone's situation, so Tony was already prepared for their mutant identity. Thank you, Hank responded with a smile. He had also heard of Tony's name for a long time. To be honest, as both were talented scientists, he had already been interested in Tony, especially after learning that the other party had successfully created a reverse magnetic field device. If they didn't have more important things to do now, maybe he would have asked the other party about the principle of the anti-magnetic field device by now. Tony also knew that time was precious, so after briefly chatting with a few people for a while, he couldn't wait to lead everyone towards the basement. Standing on a large elevator and looking at the scene around him, Chen Luo couldn't help but ask curiously, Tony, is this your latest base? Why didn't I see it before I came here last time? I didn't plan to build a plane last time. Tony rolled his eyes again and replied. Hearing the other party's answer, Chen Luo understood what was going on here. I'm afraid Tony had already remodeled this place before he decided to build an airplane. If there wasn't enough space, he would build an airplane. I'm afraid the matter has been hidden for a long time. But that's okay. It's the first time the plane has been dispatched, and with the device Tony put on it, at least the concealment has been greatly guaranteed, among other things. If they flew over in this plane, Eric wouldn't be able to spot them. Finally, a few people came all the way to the depths of the ground. When the elevator door opened, everyone just stepped out of the elevator, and they were instantly attracted by the streamlined and handsome airplane in front of them. This big thing is so cool. Is it the transportation we are going to take next? Raising his head and looking at the big guy in front of him, Scott asked with some expectancy. That's definitely. Tony nodded without hesitation and wiped the mustache on his lips, his face full of pride. This is my masterpiece. With it, I will ensure that you can reach your destination safely. As long as it doesn't want to, I don't think Magneto can find it. Speaking of this, Tony pointed to the dark blue film covering the surface of the fuselage and said with some excitement on his face, Look at this. This is the effect of my anti-magnetic field device when it is running. As long as there is this layer of film protection, this big guy can be completely excluded from all magnetic fields in nature, thereby achieving the effect of invisibility. And have you seen that the steel buildings outside are all corroded and decomposed by Magneto's magnetic field? But with the protection of this device, my plane has no tendency to decompose at all. What a masterpiece! Listening to his explanation, Hank looked at the film on the surface of the fuselage and couldn't help but sigh in admiration. Hearing this, the smile on Tony's face couldn't help becoming more complacent. Sounds good. Can we just go with it now? Seeing that this guy couldn't stop talking more and more, Chen Luo finally couldn't help it, interrupted the other person's next words, came to Tony's side, and said eagerly. The conversation was interrupted, and Tony cast a dissatisfied glance at Chen Luo, but then he seemed to think of something suddenly, with an inexplicable smile on his face and said, Are you sure? Is there anyone here who can stand up to it now? Want to control this big guy, Flight? It's not that easy. That's not easy. Chen Luo smiled and stretched out his hand to hook Tony's neck, then with a little force, he dragged him towards the plane in front of him. Since you made this big guy, you should definitely be in charge of driving it next. What are you talking about? You want me to face Magneto and Apocalypse, guys? No, I won't. I haven't lived enough. Are you sure? Chapter 204, Part 2. Are you not afraid that you will become a primitive man in the future? Then there will be no parties for you to attend. Damn Apocalypse, damn Magneto. I'll go, can I go? Angry curses sounded from the fuselage. Not long after, accompanied by a low roar came. Immediately afterwards, not far from Tony's villa, amidst the rumbling sound of the ground, a huge gap about tens of meters in length and width suddenly appeared, and under the gap, a plane about 10 meters in length slowed down, slowly emerged from the ground. With the roar of the engine, the plane gradually began to lift into the air. After reaching an altitude of about 1,000 meters in the sky, a light blue flame suddenly shot out from the tail of the plane. Under this huge amounts of propulsion, the plane rushed to the sky, go above the clouds and disappear. The other side, on the Egyptian mainland, at a height of 100 meters above the city of Apocalypse, Eric is still floating here at this moment, with his hands stretched forward, still constantly displaying his ability. It's just that compared with him now, his appearance has undergone drastic changes again. The youth recovered after successfully advancing to the 5th level mutant began to age again. The tall body gradually became rickety, the original brown hair gradually degenerated into gray, and the tight skin wrinkled again, looking very old. If it is said that Eric looked only about 30 years old before, then he is undoubtedly back to the appearance when he met Chen Luo for the first time. And he has changed a lot, and the reason why he has undergone such a change in such a short period of time is also very simple. That's because Eric overused his ability and consumed too much. In fact, with his current level as a 5th level mutant, as long as he gradually develops his own abilities step by step, he will be able to control the magnetic field of the entire planet in the future. It's just that with his ability, manipulating the magnetic field of the entire planet is undoubtedly too heavy for him, and it has even exceeded his current limit. So under such an overloaded operation, even though he was able to complete such a feat like today, because of the overload, his ability showed faint signs of degradation. And this is also the reason why his appearance is degrading towards old age. In fact, it stands to reason that Eric does not need to do this at all. With his current strength, even if he walks through cities one by one, he can easily overturn them. Even if the whole world is turned into ruins, it will only take a few months at most, and human beings have no power to resist, so there is no need for him to risk the degradation of his ability to do such a thing. Apocalypse doesn't think so, however. For him, A 5th-level mutant only needs him alone. So in his eyes, Eric, who is also a 5th-level mutant, is undoubtedly a bit of an eyesore now, since there happens to be such a how could he let go of this opportunity? Having said that, if the current Eric does not control the other party, then he would not be able to easily give up his power. But now he has no resistance at all possibly, his mind has long been controlled by Apocalypse, not to mention the degeneration of ability. Even if he loses his own life because of this, I am afraid he will not have a trace of hesitation. Just like now, it is not what he can do now to leverage the mighty force of the Earth's magnetic field. Persisting to this level has reached his limit. Next, if you continue to persist, I am afraid that there is a real risk of dying from exhaustion. In the giant pyramids, Apocalypse is also very clear about Eric's current situation, but at this moment he has no intention of stopping him, standing there quietly with cold eyes, extremely indifferent. Although he is very afraid of Eric in his heart, he will not give up so easily for Eric's combat power. At the moment, what he thinks in his heart is that as long as he is right when Fong returned to the 4th-level mutant again, he shot again to stop it. Originally, he wanted to wait until all humans were conquered before doing anything, but now it seems that the current humans have no power to resist him, so for Eric's ability he didn't feel sorry for being relegated. Then, when he watched Eric with cold eyes, he was walking towards exhaustion step by step. Thousands of meters away from the city of Apocalypse, under the driving of Tony, Chen Luo and his group finally arrived at their destination. Through the glass in front of him, with Chen Luo's eyes, he can easily see the scene thousands of meters away. When he saw the familiar figure in front of him, Chen Luo's face suddenly changed, and before he had time to talk to other people, he immediately used his teleportation ability to rush forward medical. Before everyone could react, the next moment, Chen Luo's figure appeared next to Eric. Without giving the opponent any time to react, a hand knife fell, knocking the opponent unconscious instantly. Immediately afterwards, Chen Luo hugged the opponent's body and then disappeared. All this happened so fast. Eric disappeared without a trace before the Apocalypse group in the pyramids could react. Chapter 205, Part 1. In the airplane cabin on the other side, before Tony and the others could react, in just a blink of an eye, Chen Luo appeared in front of them again. But there was another person who appeared with him. Chen, what did you just? Chen just spoke a few words, but when he saw another person next to Chen Luo, her voice suddenly stopped, her eyes narrowed, and she subconsciously said, "Is this Eric? How did he become what he is now?" Chen Luo put Eric in his hand on the ground, watched the other person regain his old appearance at this moment, frowned slightly and said, "I don't know this, but when I saw Eric just now, I already felt that he seemed I can't hold it any longer. If my guess is correct, I am afraid that using this ability will put a huge burden on his body." Hearing this, Hank quickly stepped forward and came to Eric. After checking him carefully, he raised his head and looked at Chen Luo and said, "Eric's life is not in danger now, but his current physical condition is indeed very tired. You need to rest for a while." Looking at Eric, who was unconscious and pale at the moment, Han Ku's face was very solemn. But thanks to Chen Gang's timely rescue, if we had arrived a little later, I'm afraid Eric would have been at risk of death. How could this happen? Doesn't Eric know better? Why doesn't he stop? After hearing Hank's judgment, Aurora was suddenly filled with doubts and asked in confusion. It's not up to him. At this time, Chen Luo seemed to have thought of something. A cold light flashed in his eyes, and he said calmly, "Now Eric and the others have been controlled by Apocalypse. If this order comes from Apocalypse, then everything will that make sense. I think Apocalypse doesn't want to see another level 5 mutant in the world, right? Maybe he feels a threat from Eric." As soon as these words came out, O was startled. Regarding the fact that Eric and the others were being controlled, judging from the professor's previous performance, they all had some speculations in their minds, but they never expected that even his own subordinates, Apocalypse, would not let him go. His actions shocked everyone, and at the same time they also became extremely angry. Haha, is this the ancestor of our mutant family? I have seen it today that he can do such things to his own compatriots. It seems that we must deal with him as soon as possible. If this world really falls into the hands of Apocalypse, then even if it is possible for us mutants to threaten him, Wei Qi will never let it go. Then let's set off now. Not far ahead is the city of Apocalypse. Apocalypse and the others should be there now. I think it would be better for us to rescue the professor and the others before we take action. Otherwise, with the professor's ability, we may not be able to resist him. Just as everyone began to discuss the next plan, suddenly, Tony's exclamation came from the driver's seat in front. "Look, there are changes outside." Attracted by Tony's voice, everyone subconsciously turned their heads and looked ahead. After Eric was knocked unconscious and rescued by Chen Luo, the long black dragons all over the sky above the city of Apocalypse seemed to have lost their power and began to fall towards the ground. Not just here, at the same time, all over the world, the decomposing steel buildings have also stopped decomposing, and there is no longer any change. Countless black particles floating in the sky are also falling downwards, and everything has stopped. Calm was restored again. Watching all this blankly, the people who were still in despair instantly became excited, hugging and cheering one after another. For a moment, the whole world was in joy. As the crisis led by Magneto came to an end, in the cabin on the other side, Chen Luo also received an improvement from the system in a timely manner. Ding! Congratulations to the host for completing the selection. The rewards will be distributed now. Rewards have been distributed. The mutant ability upgrade card has been placed in the host's carry-on space. The portable space is also built into the system. Chen Luo doesn't know how big the space is. However, after testing, this space can only be placed with various rewards issued by the system. No outside objects, whether dead or alive, can be placed in it. As soon as his mind moved, the next moment, relevant information about this card also fell into Chen Luo's eyes. Variant ability upgrade card. It takes effect when the card is in direct contact with the target. It can upgrade the target's ability by 1 level within 1 hour. It will expire after 1 hour. The effect is simple and clear. With just one glance, Chen Luo already understood how to use it. Then, all you need to do next is find Charles and use this card on him. Before arriving here, Chen Luo originally thought that this mission would require a lot of effort. However, he did not expect that after they arrived here, they would encounter Eric, who was already exhausted. In this state, Eric's strength is as strong as tin, which undoubtedly makes it much easier for Chen Luo to deal with him. He can easily defeat the opponent with just a teleportation. There is no doubt that this mission is also the most relaxed and enjoyable one among all the missions he has experienced before. He successfully obtained the reward without spending much effort. In this way, Chen Luo is very worried about facing Apocalypse next. It's also a little more certain. Chen Luo turned to look at Qin and said seriously, "Don't take action now, let me find a way to rescue Charles first. Otherwise, you won't be able to handle his ability now." The reason why Chen Luo said this was to appease Qin first. After all, if they all go out now, if they are attacked by Charles's mind, the others will be fine. Once Qin is stimulated by something that causes the hidden consciousness in her body to awaken, they may be even more dangerous next. After all, it is unclear whether Qin is an enemy or a friend in this awakening Phoenix Force state. Once he chooses to confront them, even Chen Luo is not sure that he can escape unscathed. So before that, he had to find a way to get Charles back to his senses. Regarding Chen Luo's analysis, everyone is well aware that with their abilities, once they encounter the professor's telepathy, they may not even have a chance to resist, and they will instantly fall into the opponent's grasp. Once something like this happens, not only will they not be able to help, they may even turn to Chen Luo. They came here to deal with Apocalypse. If they turned against Apocalypse without even having a chance to take action, then they might as well not have come. After understanding this, everyone nodded without hesitation to express their understanding. "Chen, you have to be careful." Qin came to Chen Luo and looked at him worriedly. "Don't worry. With me here, the final victory will definitely belong to us." After smiling and comforting the other person, Chen Luo didn't hesitate too much. He swayed and disappeared into the cabin in an instant. Just when Chen Luo started to act, in the pyramids, Apocalypse finally felt something strange in the outside world, and his expression changed instantly. Without thinking, his body was wrapped in purple-red energy, and then he teleported to the periphery of the pyramids. However, when he just arrived at the door and looked at the empty scene above the sky, he immediately reacted. A cold light flashed in his eyes and a low roar sounded. "Damn! Who the hell?" Accompanied by his roar, the next moment, surging energy erupted from his body instantly, forming an energy wave visible to the naked eye, which spread rapidly in all directions. A violent airflow was generated out of thin air and swept across in all directions. In an instant, with Apocalypse as the center, the area of several kilometers around was covered by the yellow sand blown up by the strong wind, filled with smoke and dust, and greatly reduced visibility. Following Apocalypse's anger this time, Chen Luo quietly approached the city of Apocalypse, looking at the giant pyramids not far in front of him. And when Chen Luo was worried about how to enter, he didn't expect that Apocalypse would suddenly send out such a big gift. Chapter 205, Part 2. Seeing that the surrounding area was quickly covered by yellow sand, Chen Luo immediately realized that this was just a good opportunity. There was no hesitation at the moment, and the teleportation was activated immediately. Inside the pyramids, there was no order from Apocalypse, so Charles and his party waited here quietly. Even though Apocalypse caused a lot of commotion outside, the faces of the few people did not change at all, looking terribly calm. However, just as the few people were waiting, at the next moment, Chen Luo appeared in front of them in an instant along with a wave of space. "Found it!" Chen Luo's voice suddenly sounded in the air, immediately attracting the attention of everyone present. Several people raised their heads subconsciously, and the moment they began to look around, Chen Luo also started to move at the same time. Inside the pyramids, because there is no sunlight, Chen Luo's ability to favor darkness has already taken effect. Coupled with his original speed, it has reached a terrifying level several times the speed of sound. Under such a rapid speed, the few people have no room for reaction and was instantly approached by Chen Luo. 0. Ask for flowers. It was still the old way. A hand knife was handed out, and when Chen Luo appeared in the air again, everyone including Charles and except Apocalypse had been wiped out by Chen Luo. Looking at the fainted figure on the ground at this moment, Chen Luo smiled relaxedly. It seems that he is much more relaxed than I imagined. After saying this, Chen Luo's eyes slowly shifted to the figure of Charles in the crowd. His eyes suddenly filled with anticipation. Then next, it should be? Before he finished speaking, the next moment, a deep roar suddenly came from behind Chen Luo. Who is it? Hearing this voice, Chen Luo's eyes narrowed. Without thinking, he reached out to grab Charles, who was unconscious on the ground, and Raven, who was closest to him, and then immediately teleported and disappeared in place. At the moment when Chen Luo disappeared, Apocalypse teleported back to the original place again. Looking at the people who were in a coma at the moment, as well as Charles who disappeared, Apocalypse's face suddenly became more gloomy, and the substantial killing intent spread wildly to the surroundings, and the turbulent energy burst out of his body in an instant, straight to the sky. Bang! The terrifying energy rushed straight to the top of the pyramids above the Apocalypse, and under the impact of this powerful energy, the top instantly shattered. Then a huge hole about tens of meters appeared. Through the hole above, it can be clearly seen that the sky filled with yellow sand is constantly passing by, and from time to time, some parts fall along the hole and fall downward. 0. It's just that before the yellow sand fell to the ground, it was blocked by the surging energy from Apocalypse. Without saying a word, Apocalypse's figure slowly left the ground, and then floated towards the hole above his head. Coming to the outside world along the entrance of the cave, looking at the yellow sand that is still permeating the outside world, Apocalypse waved his hand, and the yellow sand in the sky swept away in all directions in an instant, disappeared without a trace. Because the yellow sand is spreading towards the surroundings, the plane that Tony and the others are in is also completely covered by the yellow sand in the sky thousands of meters away at this moment. At this moment, the stealth function of the plane also lost its effect in an instant, and it was immediately exposed to the air. Soon, Apocalypse just happened to notice the abnormality there, and turned his head slowly, looking at the direction where Tony and the others were in front, with a cold arc drawn at the corner of his mouth. Finally found. That is, 1 minute before the other party found Tony and the others, on the other side, Chen Luo had brought Charles and the two back into the cabin in an instant. Putting the two of them on the ground, Chen Luo knew that time was running out, and he didn't have time to talk to others. He flipped his palm, and a silver-white card appeared instantly. After that, without hesitation, Chen Luo took the card, put the tablet on Charles's body, and meditate in his heart. Use. The next moment, the cards instantly turned into countless light spots, and they were thrown into Charles's body one after another. Seeing this scene, after seeing Chen Luo successfully brought Charles back, Qin, who was about to step forward to ask, immediately paused and subconsciously exclaimed, "What is this?" "Qin, don't come here, I'll explain to you later." Chen Luo didn't look back, but stared at Charles, who was still in a coma, his whole body tensed up, ready to strike at any time. Although he is very confident in his plan, Chen Luo is also worried that in case of any accident, if Charles still cannot get rid of Apocalypse's control after his ability is improved, then he has to make a timely move to control the opponent again. Otherwise, if Charles, who is now a level 5 mutant, attacks them, they may all be wiped out in an instant, including Chen Luo. It is precisely because of such risks that Chen Luo's nerves can be described as highly tense right now. Soon, under Chen Luo's gaze, as all the light spots poured into the opponent's body, the next moment, Charles's eyelids moved, and then slowly opened his eyes. "Professor? Is that you?" Looking at each other, Chen Luo tentatively asked such a sentence. Hearing Chen Luo's voice, Charles raised his head slowly and looked towards Chen Luo's direction. His eyes were clear and peaceful, and there was a gentle smile on his face. "Chen, this time, I have really troubled you." "Bet right." Hearing this, Chen Luo felt relieved and relaxed instantly. A smile also appeared on his face. Chen Luo said slowly, "Welcome back, Anti." Chapter 206, Part 1. After seeing Chen Luo appear again with Charles, everyone's expressions suddenly became excited. Before they could speak, when the conversation between Chen Luo and Chen Luo fell into their ears, everyone's bodies suddenly shook, as if they had thought of something, and their faces couldn't help but show a hint of surprise. "Professor, have you recovered?" Scott hurriedly stepped forward, his face flushed with excitement, and his tone was even more trembling as he asked. Hearing this voice, Charles turned his head and looked at Scott, with a gentle color on his face that was very familiar to him, and nodded lightly. "Thanks to Mr. Chen Luo, I am fine now." Upon hearing this, everyone's expressions suddenly became more excited. "Is this true, Charles?" With a smile on his face, Hank leaned down, laughed, and hugged his old friend who had been with him for decades, and his mood was extremely comfortable. "But how did you recover?" I remember you were controlled by Apocalypse before. After he was happy, he suddenly thought of something and looked at Charles curiously and asked, then you'd better ask Chen. Although I don't know very well, I think the reason why I can return to normal is inseparable from Chen's help. Charles replied with a smile. Hearing this, Hank was stunned for a moment, then quickly reacted and a light flashed in his eyes. Could it be that card just now? Thinking of this, his eyes couldn't help but move in the direction of Chen Luo, with a searching look in his eyes. In response, Chen Luo smiled and didn't answer much. He just looked at Charles and asked curiously, Charles, how do you feel now? 970 with your current ability, are you sure you can deal with Apocalypse? Upon hearing this, Charles immediately took a deep look at the other person, with a smile on his face, and nodded lightly. I think, with my current ability, I should be able to pose a threat to him. Although he didn't understand what happened just now, he could clearly feel the vast mental power in his mind like a vast ocean. With his current mental strength, Charles was confident enough that if he were to fight Apocalypse again, he may not be defeated by the opponent. In his feelings, Charles only felt that his current ability was even more powerful than when he put on the brainwave strengthening device. If he had to rely on the brainwave strengthening device before to have the ability to control humans all over the world, now he can easily do this with his own strength. This level is far beyond the level of a 4th-level mutant. If he guessed correctly, he might have reached the level of a 5th-level mutant. As a level 5 mutant, although he is far behind Apocalypse in terms of time, what he possesses is the psychic ability that is said to be the most difficult to defend. If he can fight against Apocalypse at this time, it is hard to say who will win and who will lose. The least he can be sure of is that he will never be controlled by Apocalypse again. After hearing Charles's answer, Chen Luo quickly continued, Charles, with your current ability, can you help Eric and the others remove Apocalypse's control? Hearing this, Charles thought for a moment, then nodded with a smile. I think it shouldn't be a problem. As he spoke, he also noticed Eric and the two who were still unconscious at the side. Without saying anything, with a thought, the mighty spiritual power instantly emerged from the body and then rushed into the minds of the two. In just a few seconds, when Charles stopped moving and retracted his ability, he didn't see any difficulty at all, and said slowly, they're all right now. Seeing that Charles successfully released the control of the two of them so quickly, Chen Luo and the others all flashed a gleam of joy on their faces. However, before they had time to speak, the next moment, Tony's anxious voice came. Oh, damn it. That blue monster is after us? Tony, you bastard. How can you say that to Hank? Chen Luo subconsciously complained, but soon he reacted. His eyes shrank instantly, and before he had time to say anything, he immediately pulled Charles to the side, cast teleportation again, and disappeared. On the top of the giant pyramids, after discovering the traces of Chen Luo and his party, Apocalypse's face instantly became more ferocious, and the corner of his mouth curled up in a cruel arc, and he slowly stretched out his right hand and made a light move. The moment Chen Luo and the others disappeared again, the plane that Tony and the others were on suddenly shook, and then the entire fuselage seemed to be held tightly by an invisible big hand, uncontrollably towards the plane where the Tianguan was. Direction removed. Shit, what shall we do now? Seeing his side approaching the opponent quickly, Tony turned the steering wheel anxiously, trying to stay away from the opponent. However, no matter how hard he tried, the plane had no intention of turning, and was still heading towards Apocalypse at an extremely fast speed. Don't worry everyone. Sean and the professor have already gone to deal with Apocalypse. We will be fine. Sheen said loudly with a firm face. Even though she is in a dangerous situation now, Sheen didn't panic in the slightest and seemed very calm. Obviously, in her heart, she has extremely high trust in Chen Luo. Besides Chen Luo, there is also Charles who has returned to normal. With the power of their two kings, Qin Xinxia has enough confidence to successfully defeat Apocalypse. After hearing Qin's words, Tony and the others also made up their minds, and their faces became much more relaxed. Like Scott, they naturally have confidence in Charles, and for Tony, after seeing Chen Luo's strength, he also has absolute confidence in himself as a good friend. And the facts did not disappoint a few people. Before they were completely close to each other, the next moment, Chen Luo's figure suddenly appeared from the sky, rushing in the direction of Apocalypse. In the state of bat transformation, Chen Luo flapped his wings fiercely behind his back, and then his speed skyrocketed. In the blink of an eye, he successfully broke through the speed of sound and disappeared in midair. Bang! There was a terrifying sound of piercing through the air, and a circle of white air burst out suddenly in the air. Before Apocalypse could react, Chen Luo had already approached him. Get down! With a fierce punch, the terrifying speed several times the speed of sound, coupled with his own tens of tons of terrifying punching power. At the moment Chen Luo's fist hit Apocalypse, a powerful shockwave erupted, and Apocalypse there was no room for resistance at all, and his figure turned into a sharp arrow, falling straight to the ground below. Boom! In just a blink of an eye, Apocalypse was punched to the ground by Chen Luo's punch. and at the moment it collided with the ground, accompanied by a huge amount of noise. Not far from the pyramids, a tall building with a height of tens of meters instantly disappeared without a trace. Instead, there is a huge pit that must be tens of meters long. As the punch fell, Chen Luo did not choose to take advantage of the victory to pursue, but quietly suspended in the sky, quietly waiting. Definitely, at the moment when Apocalypse was accurately hit by Chen Luo, the plane that had been coming towards this direction finally resumed its action ability again, and then stopped in place again under Tony's control. Feeling that the fuselage stopped shaking, everyone present breathed a sigh of relief. Siete, Chun, when will you be able to fly? After relaxing, Tony finally noticed Chen Luo's appearance now, and when he saw the pair of wings behind Chen Luo, his eyes widened subconsciously, his face full of surprise. But his voice, Chen Luo, was destined not to be heard. After blowing the opponent away with one punch, the reason why Chen Luo stopped in place was very simple. Just after disappearing together with Charles, Chen Luo brought him to the interior of the pyramids and handed over the mutants on the ground that were still controlled by Apocalypse to Charles. He left first to attract Apocalypse's attention. Just wait for him to release the control of these mutants before coming out to help. Judging from the time it took for Charles to release Eric from the control just now, it should be resolved by now. Chapter 206, Part 2. Just as Chen Luo was thinking about this, the next moment, accompanied by a violent roar, Apocalypse's voice was like thunder, spreading to the surroundings in an instant. Damn, no matter who you are, people who came here today don't even think about leaving. Along with the sound, there was a turbulent energy visible to the naked eye that suddenly erupted from the deep hole on the ground, and then rushed straight towards Chen Luo in the sky. Whoosh! Facing this attack, Chen Luo definitely would not choose to resist it head-on, and launched the teleportation again. Just when the attack was about to come, he calmly dodged it. Huh? Mastered the teleport ability. No wonder you have the confidence to come here to challenge me. But if it's only this level, it's not enough. While speaking, Apocalypse's figure slowly rose from the huge deep pit in the ground, with both feet off the ground, suspended in the air. You talk a lot. Just as he finished speaking, the next moment, Chen Luo's figure appeared beside him in an instant, holding his fist high, and then swung forward violently. However, in the face of his attack, Apocalypse was already on guard at this time, snorted coldly, his eyes were cold and cruel, and had no intention of dodging, just watching Chen Luo's fist fall. Seeing the other party's actions, Chen Luo felt a warning. But before he could react, suddenly, he only felt a pain in his right hand, and subconsciously turned his head to look. When he saw clearly what happened, Chen Luo's eyes tightened instantly, before seeing the other party making the slightest movement. At this moment Chen Luo's right arm silently turned into countless sand and gravel, blowing away with the wind. Without even thinking about it, Chen Luo immediately flickered and disappeared in place again. It's useless. In my eyes, your teleportation is just a defective product. Seeing Chen Luo's movements, Apocalypse showed a cruel smile on his face, and then his body was once again wrapped in purple energy, and then disappeared in an instant just like Chen Luo at the gate of the pyramids. When Chen Luo's figure reappeared, behind him, Apocalypse also followed here instantly. Is it only to this extent? If so, then your life will probably end here. Staring fixedly at Chen Luo's back, Apocalypse's eyes were filled with murderous intent, and his eyes were once again covered by a layer of grayish white, and he was about to launch his ability to attack immediately. It's time. However, at this moment, Chen Luo's voice suddenly sounded. Hearing this, Apocalypse didn't have time to think about what Chen Luo meant. The next moment, his body shook suddenly, and then he stopped his movement slowly and stood quietly on the spot. The earth doesn't move. Chen Luo turned around slowly and looked behind him. When he saw the still Apocalypse, Chen Luo finally heaved a sigh of relief, and his originally dignified face became much lighter in an instant. Finally done. Following Chen Luo's voice, behind Apocalypse, at the gate of the pyramids, the figure of Charles slowly emerged from the darkness. Although he can't walk normally, his ability can be said to have made a qualitative leap after he briefly broke through to the 5th level mutant. It's like now, although Charles's real body is still inside the pyramids, if other people are watching, they can't see Charles's figure, but they can see it in Chen Luo's vision enough to see each other. This is because Charles has placed a duplication of his own soul in the depths of Chen Luo's heart, so the figure of Charles that Chen Luo sees today is also faithfully in his spiritual world. It just exists. In this state, Charles's actions are completely the same as those of normal people. He slowly walks to the front of Apocalypse 4.0, looking at the sculpture like Apocalypse at this moment. He frowned slightly, and his face was no longer as gentle as before. Looking at the other party's expression, Chen Luo's originally relaxed mood became dignified again, and asked in a deep voice, "Well, Charles, can you keep him under control?" "I'm afraid it will be difficult." Facing Chen Luo's question, Charles replied without any concealment. Although I have temporarily controlled him now, Apocalypse's ability is indeed very strong. I don't think it will take long for him to break through my restraint and regain his freedom. Hearing this, Chen Luo's face suddenly became more serious. He was silent for a moment, and then asked again, "How long can you hold on?" "Based on the current situation, I'm afraid it won't take more than half an hour at most. After half an hour, I'm afraid my ability will also be consumed too much, and I won't be able to restrict the opponent again in a short time." At this time, Charles didn't know that the 5th level mutant ability he got was temporary, but Chen Luo knew very well that the other party could only become a 5th level mutant ability for 1 hour. After half an hour, most of his ability has been consumed, and within the remaining half hour, he can no longer restrict Apocalypse. So the best way now is to find a way to eliminate Apocalypse within half an hour. Otherwise, once the opponent is out of trouble, he can only hope that the Phoenix Force in the piano can awaken, so that it is possible to deal with Apocalypse. But such a method also has a huge risk of getting out of control, so he will never use it at will unless it is a last resort. It seems that we must find a way as soon as possible. However, just as Chen Luo was trying to find a way to get rid of the other party, at this moment, the mutation happened again. Chapter 207, Part 1. In front of Chen Luo, the smile on Charles's face suddenly disappeared, and then under Chen Luo's somewhat surprised gaze, his body shook violently and almost disappeared. Seeing this scene, Chen Luo's expression changed and he hurriedly asked, "Charles, what's wrong with you?" "Chen, we must deal with Apocalypse quickly. His resistance is getting stronger and stronger now. I'm afraid I won't be able to hold on for long." Charles's face suddenly became very serious, and he said to Chen Luo solemnly. While he was chatting with Chen Luo just now, in Apocalypse's spiritual world, Charles could clearly feel that Apocalypse was now full of anger and murderous intent. Like a ferocious beast, it began to struggle crazily, constantly attacking the mental cage set by Charles. The attacks continued, which brought him great pressure. This feeling is not unfamiliar to Charles. When Chen was young, in order to curb Chen's increasingly manic personality and her increasingly uncontrollable ability, he had no choice but to seal off her manic side. Deep in his soul, the piano at that time and the Apocalypse now are quite similar. You must know that Charles' ability was only level 4 at that time. Now, after being promoted to level 5 mutant, his psychic power has increased hundreds of times. Under such circumstances, the pressure Apocalypse brings to him is still being on par with Chen from back then shows how terrifying Apocalypse is. And this is due to the fact that Apocalypse's spiritual aspect is not its strong point. Although Charles is now the strongest spiritual master on this planet, it has to be said that compared with ancient mutants like Apocalypse, the spiritual aspect between the two, the difference is not very big. Definitely, if Charles and Apocalypse are given the same amount of time to develop, then his strength will be much stronger than now, but judging from the current situation, Charles, who has just been promoted to a 5th level mutant, wants to completely subdue Apocalypse. Saying that is obviously an extremely difficult thing to do. If just now Charles expected that he could only trap the other party for half an hour, now it seems that this number needs to be reduced by at least half. Feeling the strength of the opponent's struggle getting stronger and stronger, Charles could faintly see a hint of pain in his eyes. Obviously, the opponent's continuous impact also caused some damage to his spirit. Upon seeing this, Chen Luo's face became solemn, without any hesitation, and he immediately started to take action. During the period when Apocalypse is being restrained, it is undoubtedly the best opportunity for him to use this to get rid of the opponent. If the opponent breaks free, the difficulty of dealing with Apocalypse will undoubtedly increase greatly. Maybe by then, they can only hope to make a comeback by relying on Chen's Phoenix Force awakening. However, if there is another personality awakening hidden in Chen's body, then he can't guarantee that the other party will not attack them. So the best way is to hold the opportunity in your own hands to be the most secure. While thinking about it, Chen Luo didn't know when. The right hand that had grown again made a fist mark, and the fist force of tens of tons slammed toward the useless face. Boom. A dull sound came. Feeling the touch on his right hand, Chen Luo instantly frowned and looked straight ahead. After receiving his punch from the front, Inato still stood where he was. The skin on his face was instantly festered by Chen Luo's punch, but then, in less than 2 seconds, under the opponent's self-healing ability comparable to Chen Luo's super speed regeneration, his injury instantly recovered. Looking at this scene, Chen Luo's heart suddenly shrank, and he had a clear understanding of the horror of Apocalypse. With just this punch, Chen Luo could feel that the defensive power of Apocalypse might not be inferior to his at all. In addition to his terrifying self-healing ability, with Chen Luo's current strength, it would be very difficult to inflict damage on him. Harm. Since this method does not work, it has to think of other ways. What to do to kill him for good? Proxima Midnight Magic? This idea just flashed in my mind, and then Chen Luo decisively gave up. Although Chen Luo admits that Proxima Midnight Magic has many uses, it is unfortunate that most of the Proxima Midnight Magic he has learned is used for auxiliary purposes, and there are many magics that are biased towards attack. even if its power is not as good as his fist, let alone be able to kill Apocalypse. In addition to the Proxima Midnight magic, Chen Luo looked at his abilities. Suddenly, his eyes flickered slightly, and then moved to the direction of Apocalypse. With a thought, he activated the ability Instantly Blood Manipulation. He seldom uses this ability now, but this does not mean that this ability is weak. On the contrary, it is precisely because it causes too much damage, so Chen Luo will not take it under normal circumstances. Come out against the enemy. With his current mental power, if he fully activates this ability, all human beings within a radius of several kilometers will be under his control. As long as he is willing, he can even draw out all the blood in the target's body in an instant, causing huge damage in an instant. Casualties. Not only ordinary people, even a 4th-level mutant like Eric, if there is no special ability to resist, under the control of his blood, there is no possibility of resisting at all. In Chen Luo's view, the effect of this ability is no less than his energy conversion ability. If it is used well, it is not impossible for the weak to defeat the strong. I just don't know if this ability will work on Apocalypse. With the thought of giving it a try, Chen Luo immediately aimed at the direction of Apocalypse and started to activate his own 590 ability with all his strength. Under the effect of nearly 500 points of mental power, the ability of blood control began to play a role immediately. I saw the blood in Apocalypse's body suddenly began to riot and began to crazily rush towards everywhere, impatiently wanting to rush out Apocalypse's body. Chen Luo was not careless at all. His eyes were fixed on the front, and he was wholeheartedly controlling the blood in the target's body, trying to draw it all out. Sensing the situation in Apocalypse's body at the moment, Chen Luo was overjoyed, thinking that this move could have an effect on it, but the next moment, he changed his mind instantly. As if feeling a change in his body, Apocalypse's spirit suddenly became more and more manic, and terrifying mental shocks began to erupt constantly one after another. Under his indiscriminate bombardment, Charles's mental cage was finally broken by him. There is a gap. Seeing this, Apocalypse's movements were astonishingly fast, and immediately with a ray of spirit, he controlled his body with difficulty and began to block Chen Luo's attack. During his innumerable reincarnation rituals, by coincidence, Apocalypse also met a mutant with the ability to control blood pressure, so the current Apocalypse also possesses this ability. Therefore, after the other party's energy was allocated, the blood control belonging to Apocalypse immediately started to activate, and quickly calmed down the restless blood in the body again, restoring calm. Chapter 208, Part 1. After feeling this scene, Chen Luo also had a headache. He also didn't expect that the other party actually had the same ability as him. In this way, blood manipulation could not cause any harm to him, so now he still needs to find another way. It was at this time that Chen Luo suddenly discovered that among his abilities, there seemed to be no killer move. In the past, when fighting, he relied more on his own speed and strength to fight the enemy, but these were of little use when facing Apocalypse, so now he was somewhat helpless against Apocalypse. It is undoubtedly difficult to damage it by relying on pure physical damage. If you want to completely destroy the opponent, it seems that there is no other way except Qin's Phoenix Force. Unfortunately, if Charles's spiritual power was stronger enough, he might be able to forcibly erase the opponent's consciousness and destroy him from the spiritual level. But judging from his current ability, he undoubtedly cannot do this. Just when Chen Luo was at a loss what to do, the next moment, Charles, who was originally very serious, suddenly changed his face and his mind began to vibrate violently, as if he was about to disappear at any time. Chen, do it quickly, Apocalypse's resistance is getting stronger and stronger. I'm afraid I won't be able to hold on for long. As these words fell, at the same time, Apocalypse began to undergo changes again. The surging energy slowly began to emerge from the opponent's body, like an electric arc constantly flashing on his body. Just a random arc fell to the ground, and the ground was instantly split into a gully tens of meters long. Such power was astonishing to see. Lu's heart skipped a beat. Before he could react, the next moment, an arc of electricity rushed out of the opponent's body and shot straight in the direction of Chen Luo. Fortunately, after breaking his arm just now, Chen Luo turned on the ability of energy conversion early, so when the arc hit him, he didn't seem too panicked. He stood there motionless, letting the arc go straight. It fell straight on him. Chun, be careful. Seeing this, Charles's pupil shrank, but he had just spoken a few words and had no time to stop him. He just watched Apocalypse's attack hit the target. But then, when he saw Chen Luo's reaction, Charles's face trembled, and his eyes were filled with shock. This is Zhao's ability? Looking at Chen Luo's rapidly shaking body and the arc that gradually began to dissipate, Charles's eyes flickered, as if he vaguely understood something. But before he had time to think about it, at this moment, he could clearly feel that in Apocalypse's spiritual world, as Apocalypse struggled harder and harder, the mental cage he had set up gradually began to have more cracks. If it continues like this, I'm afraid it won't take more than a few minutes to completely break through the shackles. Apocalypse's mental power continued to pour out along with these cracks, and correspondingly, the flashing arcs on Apocalypse became more dense, and finally formed a series of blue thunder and lightning whips, Lan Kuang wreaking havoc on all sides. As the arcs spread outwards more and more manically, the surrounding buildings had no room to resist, and began to collapse one after another, turning into countless ruins. At the same time, a turbulent energy wave suddenly centered on him and began to spread to the surroundings. Under such energy impact, the giant pyramids in front of Chen Luo also began to rapidly collapse and decompose, began to turn into countless gravel, and dissipated in the air middle. Under Apocalypse's desperate struggle, his ability is now gradually starting to get out of control, and terrifying energy is overflowing. If this trend continues, not only this pyramids, but also the entire city of Apocalypse will be destroyed by his ability under. What's worse is that Tony and the others are now not far outside Apocalypse City. If the opponent's attack is allowed to continue, it won't be long before it will affect them. Thinking of such a scene, Chen Luo's eyes narrowed and he immediately made a decision. The body swayed and disappeared in an instant. In less than a second, Chen Luo appeared on the spot with Charles in the pyramids. Then Chen Luo kept moving, pressing his other hand on Apocalypse, launching a teleport, and brought then the two of them started to move away quickly. List. Seeing this scene from a distance, Tony, who was always paying attention to Chen Luo's direction, changed his face and subconsciously exclaimed, his eyes full of worry. When he saw Chen Luo disappearing with Apocalypse, Tony suddenly had a bad feeling. Behind Tony, Qin's eyes were fixed on the front. The moment Chen Luo disappeared, Qin's heart suddenly shrank, her body shook slightly, and she stood quietly on the spot without saying a word. What no one noticed was that in Qin's eyes at this moment, two groups of fierce flames were burning, as if they were going to burn everything. While on the way using teleportation, Apocalypse's energy began to become more and more manic. As long as any bit of energy fell on Charles on the side, it could be evaporated instantly. However, every time the energy was about to explode, Chen Luo used his own ability to forcibly absorb it into his body. I don't know how much time passed, but after feeling the energy in Apocalypse in his hand becoming more and more turbulent, Chen Luo knew that the opponent was not far away from Charles's control at this moment, so he immediately stopped moving. Regardless of where he was now, he casually placed Charles on the ground. His body pressed closely against Apocalypse, and he began to frantically absorb the energy emanating from Wei Qi's body. Seeing Chen Luo's movements, Charles seemed to have thought of something. His expression changed, and he subconsciously said, Chen, what on earth are you going to do? Vast energy like a vast ocean pours into the body constantly. In addition to the energy absorbed before, it has almost reached the limit that Chen Luo can absorb. If he continues to absorb it, Chen Luo is in danger of exploding and dying. But these are no longer within the scope of his consideration. Now is the best opportunity to kill Apocalypse. Chen Luo will never let such an opportunity slip away from his hands. His body began to expand uncontrollably, and feeling the severe pain radiating from all over his body, Chen Luo gritted his teeth, looked in the direction of Charles, smiled at him, and said, Charles, live well. Leave Apocalypse to me. But don't worry, I won't die. Tell Qin and others, promise, that I will come back one day. So, see you next time. After saying this, under Chen Luo's control, the energy absorbed in his body began to be converted into nuclear energy instantly. A few seconds later, when the energy that Chen Luo could absorb finally reached the limit, under Charles's shocked gaze, a dazzling orange halo began to emerge from Chen Luo's body. Boom! The next moment, accompanied by an unprecedented terrifying loud noise, Chen Luo's body exploded like a real nuclear bomb. There was no time to react. The terrifying high temperature instantly began to spread from the position where Chen Luo was, and in the blink of an eye, Charles on the side was involved. Under the terrifying high temperature of tens of millions of degrees, even Apocalypse could no longer withstand it, and the body decomposed and dissipated instantly. A huge mushroom cloud tens of miles high suddenly exploded in the world. After detecting this, in an instant, lightning from all over the world began to gather here. Chapter 209, Part 1. Almost at the same time, alarms began to sound one after another in military bases all over the world. After seeing what the detection radar showed, a series of exclamations suddenly sounded in the hall. *T. Is this true? That this could happen? Isn't this impossible? Haven't all nuclear weapons in the world been destroyed? Hearing the noise coming from the hall, the commander, who was also in the hall with his eyes fixed on the screen and his frown suddenly darkened, stood up and shouted angrily, Shut up, everyone! When he shouted angrily, the whole place suddenly fell into silence. After seeing that it finally calmed down, his face looked better. He pointed at the soldier next to him and asked in a deep voice, Soldier, please answer. What did you find just now? Also, what was the reason for the siren just now? The soldier who was pointed out was stunned for a moment, then immediately stood up and replied loudly, "Reporting to you, sir. Just now our radar detected a huge amount of nuclear energy reaction in the area of Island F in the Chicken Country. According to the detection, a nuclear bomb with a yield of about 10 million tons should have exploded there just now." "What did you say?" Upon hearing this, the officer's originally calm expression suddenly changed. His eyes widened subconsciously, and his face was full of disbelief. A nuclear bomb exploded? How is this possible? Weren't all the nuclear weapons destroyed by that bastard apocalypse? Where did the nuclear bombs come from on F Island? 193, and if I remember correctly, footpot chicken shouldn't have the ability to independently develop nuclear weapons. That's right, if that's the case, then how do they have nuclear bombs? Damn it, is there a way they can hide that guy from Apocalypse? How did they do it? The questions came one after another, and his face gradually became more and more gloomy. He was silent for a moment, and began to think carefully in his heart. Obviously, after hearing that a nuclear bomb exploded over the side of Jayapanji, he was now highly suspicious that the other party might be doing something secretly behind their backs. Just like now, even with the possession of nuclear bombs, this country that has been regarded as a younger brother by Yingjiang for many years dares to hide something, which undoubtedly caused him to be highly dissatisfied. Now he has made a plan in his mind. As long as the matter on Apocalypse is resolved, he must report the situation to the president more often and explore the other party's background. At the very least, you have to ask the other party how they possessed the nuclear bomb and how they concealed it from Apocalypse. These thoughts flashed through his mind, but soon, another doubt suddenly emerged in his heart. Now that Taiyo Benji has nuclear weapons, why didn't he choose to continue hiding them instead of detonating them directly? Is there something hidden in this? Thinking of this, for some reason, his heart suddenly moved. He quickly raised his head and said, "Quickly, contact me the president."
Yes.
Later, after getting in touch with the president, he immediately reported the situation he had just detected to the other party. After hearing his report, as expected, the president in the White House was immediately furious. Obviously, Mr. President has undoubtedly been dissatisfied with the fact that the chickens dared to conceal their behavior. Just when he was thinking about what reason he should use to attack the other party, the voice on the other end of the phone rang again. "Mr. President, I think our top priority now is to ask as soon as possible why the potato chicken detonated a nuclear bomb, and also detonated it within their own territory. I think there must be some hidden secret in this." "Huh? You mean?" Upon hearing this, the president quickly reacted, frowned subconsciously, and began to think. "Your Excellency, Mr. President, do you think there are any situations in the world today, apart from wars between countries, that would cause them to use a mass murderer like nuclear weapons?" After being reminded like this, the president's expression suddenly changed, and he said with some uncertainty, "John, you mean those mutants?"
Yes.
John, the commander of the military base, said with a solemn face on the other end of the phone. "According to my judgment, if there are any kind of mutants who need to use nuclear weapons, I am afraid that only those people have the qualifications." John stated his analysis word for word, "So I suspect that the Tuanjio Pinji side may have started a battle with the Apocalypse side. If my judgment is correct, the Apocalypse side probably chose to detonate nuclear bombs in their own country because they launched an attack on the Footpan Chicken area. After all, if they didn't do this, their entire land would be destroyed. There is a risk of being invaded by Apocalypse. So I suggest that we should get the corresponding information from Footpot Chicken as soon as possible. If they really defeat Apocalypse and successfully capture Apocalypse and Magneto, then on our side." He hadn't finished speaking yet, but the president already understood what he meant. If Apocalypse is really defeated by the opponent under the nuclear bomb at this moment, and successfully falls into the hands of the opponent, then it is unknown what gains they will gain from studying the bodies of Apocalypse and others. If they can take this opportunity to develop some kind of powerful weapon, will the other party still be their little brother of Yingjiang country as before? Regarding this, he had deep doubts in his heart. Thinking of such consequences, the president's face became much more solemn. After ending the call with John, he immediately contacted the government and asked him sharply. Faced with the eldest father's accountability, the Footpot Chickens also looked confused. To be honest, just after they received the news that a nuclear bomb exploded in their own territory, the ZF members were extremely confused and had no idea what was going on. Not to mention whether they had caught Apocalypse, they had no clue where the nuclear bomb came from, so when faced with Big Daddy's accountability, they looked like they didn't know anything about it. They felt that there was nothing wrong with their answers, but in the eyes of Mr. President, who had long been suspicious of the other party, it was a sign of something ulterior. Knowing that he couldn't get anything out of them, the president immediately hung up the phone. Recalling the other party's performance just now, a cold light flashed in his eyes, and at the same time he had secretly made a decision in his heart. Now that the younger brother has become disobedient, and the other party may have what he wants in his hands, what is there to say? If he doesn't beat the other party hard and get what he wants back, then he, the big brother, it's all in vain. The idea of taking action was already in his mind, But for the sake of safety, the president still did not take action immediately. Now he still needs to determine one thing, that is, was the previous nuclear bomb explosion intended to deal with Taiwansuo? Regarding this, he planned to send a force again to check out the city of Apocalypse. If there is really no trace of Apocalypse there, then it is very likely that the other party really wanted the footpot chicken. But if Apocalypse can still be seen there, then he will postpone his action. After all, the threat of Apocalypse has not been eliminated, and the things on my brother's side are somewhat insignificant before such a crisis that can destroy the world. After thinking about this, the president's brows relaxed slightly, and then he called again and began to issue new orders. Just when all the countries in the world were making a fuss about the nuclear explosion of the footpot chicken, on the other side, over the city of Inchi. At this moment, nearly an hour has passed since Chen Luo and the others disappeared. However, after such a long time, they still have not seen Chen Luo return. The atmosphere in the cabin suddenly became a little quiet. At this moment, everyone's eyes were focused on Qin, their eyes full of worry. Chapter 209, Part 2. Yoshin stepped forward to comfort her, but at this time they didn't know what to say, even Scott, who had always had a crush on Qin. That guy Chen will be fine. Suddenly, Tony's voice sounded in the cabin. Chapter 210, Part 1. Looking closely out the window, his face was full of confidence. Don't forget, everyone, that guy can teleport. If there is any danger, can't he just use teleport to avoid it? So everyone should rest assured that guy Chan may have solved Apocalypse, and then wait for us to go back at home. Hearing Tony's words, several people were instantly refreshed. Even Qin's face began to show a glimmer of hope. She raised her head and said quickly, then let's go back first. Maybe Chunjan has already gone back? Everyone looked at each other and nodded in unison. However, just as Tony was about to fly back to New York, Raven, who had been in a coma for a long time, finally woke up. She slowly opened her eyes and stood up with some confusion. Following her movements, everyone was instantly attracted. After seeing Raven wake up, Hank quickly stepped forward to ask, Raven, you wake up. Hearing this voice, Raven glanced at Hank and others. Her face was startled, and she subconsciously said, Hank, why are you here? And where am I now? After saying this, she seemed to suddenly remember something. Her face changed, and she hurriedly said, by the way, have you seen Eric? He has been controlled by Apocalypse now. I have to save him quickly. Obviously, after being mentally imprinted by Apocalypse, Raven's memory has stayed at the moment before he was not controlled. In her memory at this moment, Eric has just been controlled by Apocalypse. In order to prevent Eric and Apocalypse from getting together, she must have to act quickly. However, she had just turned around, and as soon as she glanced around, the figure who was still in a coma in the cabin immediately came into view. Seeing this familiar voice, Raven froze, her face was a little dazed, and she murmured, Eric? Why is he here? Raven, don't you remember? Seeing her reaction, Hank seemed to understand something, and quickly stepped forward and told her everything that had happened in the past few days. After listening to his narration, Raven was shocked, and her eyes instantly became extremely complicated. So, Chun, he is now? Chun will be fine. He must be waiting for me at the college now. Before he could finish speaking, Qin's voice suddenly sounded. Looking at Qin's firm eyes, Raven was silent for a moment, and finally nodded slightly, affirming, I believe it too. With his strength, things will not happen so easily. After learning about Chen Luo's situation, Raven was a little anxious and had no objections to everyone's decision to leave and return. The first thought in her mind at this moment was to confirm Chen Luo's safety. So, after reaching a consensus, everyone immediately started to return. Soon, when Tony finally piloted the plane to land in the open space in front of the college, Qin and the others quickly walked out of the cabin and hurried towards the college. Arriving at the hall full of expectations, Qin kept walking and hurriedly walked towards the bedroom where she was. List. Opening the bedroom door, Qin quickly walked into the house. However, when she looked around, she still didn't see that familiar figure. Seeing this, Qin's heart sank suddenly, and her face instantly became extremely anxious. She immediately turned around and began to search for Chen Luo's figure in the entire building. However, when she searched the entire building, she found no trace of Chen Luo's return. Seeing this, Qin's originally hopeful heart gradually fell to the bottom, and her face became dimmed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Her heart was shrouded in huge amounts of despair. At the same time, deep in her consciousness, the other side of her personality that had been sealed by Charles for decades and had become increasingly manic seemed to have discovered something and began to become increasingly crazier, impacting the surrounding mental cage that tightly sealed her inside. With her constant impact, gradually, the flame deep in Qin's eyes began to become more and more intense. How did you find Chen? On the other side, Raven, who also searched the entire academy, joined the crowd again. After seeing Orolo, she immediately asked anxiously, Orolo's face was gloomy, and she slowly shook her head. I've asked all the children in the academy just now, and none of them saw Professor Chen and Professor come back. Is that so? Hearing this, Raven's heart sank instantly, and his face was full of disappointment. Everyone looked at each other, not knowing what to say. The next moment, the phone next to them rang. 0. Please give me flowers. Hearing this voice, several people were refreshed instantly, and Orolo quickly came to the phone, picked up the phone and put it to his ear. Hello, may I ask who you are? Alolo, is that you? Professor. Hearing this familiar voice, Orolo exclaimed subconsciously, and an uncontrollable look of surprise appeared on her face. Professor, where are you now? How is Apocalypse? Also, is Chen with you now? Orolo, listen to me. Following Charles's narration on the other end of the phone, Orolo's face gradually turned from surprise to calm, and finally became faintly dim, with eyes filled with unconcealable disappointment. Is that so? I see, Professor. Then we'll pick you up right away. 0. Hanging up the phone, just as Orolo turned around, Chen appeared behind her at some point, holding her hands tightly, with hope on her face. Ororo, how is he? Where is he now? Facing Chen's eyes, Orolo lowered her head slightly, and explained in a low voice, Chen. He seems to have disappeared with Apocalypse. After saying this, Orolo seemed to have thought of something and quickly remedied. But don't worry, the professor told me just now that Chen asked him to tell you before leaving that he will come back. Jean, you have to trust him. Don't give up hope. Did he really say that? Hearing this sentence, Chen was like a drowning man grabbing the last straw. Hope appeared in his eyes, and he couldn't help murmuring, Chen won't lie to me. I believe in him. He will definitely come back. As he kept repeating these words at the same time, the flame in Chen's eyes gradually began to extinguish and disappeared again. Seeing Chen's reaction, everyone looked at each other and didn't say a word. 2 days later, the professor returned again, along with Fury, after consulting with the council. Finally, the news of Apocalypse's death spread all over the world in an instant. As soon as this news came out, the world instantly fell into joy. So far, the Apocalypse crisis has finally been passed without any risk. As time goes by, gradually, the apocalypse that almost destroyed the world at the beginning has become history and gradually forgotten by mankind. Chapter 211, Part 1. In the blink of an eye, without realizing it, time has arrived 8 years later. New York City, Queens. In a room that, although not large, looked very warm, a voice sounded along with the aroma of food wafting from the kitchen. May, Peter, Tion is hungry. Hearing this voice, Peter, who had been waiting for a long time at the dining table in the living room, his eyes suddenly lit up. He quickly got up and rushed towards the kitchen. Aunt May, just wait here. I'll take the dishes. Looking at Peter's hurried back, May smiled helplessly, said nothing, and sat quietly at the dining table to wait. Chen, I'm here. What's delicious today? Jogging all the way to the kitchen, Peter looked expectantly at Chen Luo, who was busy in the kitchen, and asked. Snapped. Hearing this boy's name, Chen Luo rolled his eyes, patted 310 on the back of his head with a look of dissatisfaction, and corrected him. What did you call me? You called me Chen too? Uncle, do you understand? Holding the back of his head, it was Peter's turn to roll his eyes and mutter loudly. Don't try to take advantage of me. You obviously look a few years older than me. Speaking of this, Peter's eyes moved quickly and he glanced towards the living room. Then he sneakily approached Chen Luo and whispered, Unless you catch Aunt May one day, I might consider calling you uncle. Snapped. You brat. What are you thinking about all day long? Chen Luo gave the boy another slap in the face very skillfully and said naturally, Isn't it a matter of time? I think you should change your mind as soon as possible. Okay, there's a process of getting used to it first, right? Upon hearing this, Peter rolled his eyes wildly. Chen, you are such a narcissistic guy. After saying this, Peter ignored him, picked up the plate, turned around and ran towards the living room without looking back. This boy. Seeing the other parties back leaving in a hurry, Chen Luo smiled and shook his head. This time, he didn't want to deal with him. He turned around and picked up the remaining dishes and walked towards the living room. At dinner time, the standard 4 dishes and 1 soup were placed on the dining table. Smelling the aroma of the food on the table, Peter subconsciously took a few deep breaths, looking a little anxious. Even though he has been eating such a sumptuous dinner for nearly a month, he is still not tired of it at all and is still looking forward to it as always. Definitely, every time he saw the delicious food on the table, he secretly began to feel happy. If they hadn't accidentally met Chen Luo, who was in a coma a month ago in a street alley and couldn't bear it, and then took him back home, his life would not have changed. Come to such changes. Thank God I met Chen. Otherwise, I would have had to eat mashed potatoes for years. Peter groaned secretly. He definitely respects Aunt May, who has taken care of him since childhood, But one thing I have to say is that he has basically grown up eating mashed potatoes for more than 10 years. Unfortunately, besides mashed potatoes, he has grown up eating mashed potatoes. Besides, Aunt May really has no ability in cooking. So after eating mashed potatoes for more than 10 years, Peter was usually very sensible and did not express any dissatisfaction, but in his heart, he was already a little tired. Fortunately, at this time, God gave their family a cooking god. Since the existence of Chen Luo, Peter basically eats 3 meals a day at home. He has lost all interest in lunch in the school cafeteria on weekdays, and since he stopped eating in the cafeteria, this immediately aroused the dissatisfaction of his friend who grew up with him, Harry Osborn. After all, the two of them used to go to the cafeteria together. Now that Peter was gone, Harry suddenly felt a little lonely. Regarding his friend's dissatisfaction, Peter didn't say much. Instead, he invited the friend to his home as a guest one day, and then let him taste the food at home. After truly tasting Chen Luo's craftsmanship, Harry suddenly understood a lot about Peter's behavior of returning home frequently. At the same time, he also quietly increased the number of visits to Peter's home in the following time. Just like now, after the meal is ready, Chen Luo is about to invite the two of them to eat. But at this moment, it seems that they have discussed it, and the next moment, a crisp bell rings. Ah! Hearing this voice, Peter put down the spoon in his hand, with helplessness written on his face. It must be Harry again. How many times has he been here this month? Stop complaining, kid. Chen Luo smiled and patted his shoulder, urging, it's just a matter of adding a pair of bowls and chopsticks. Go and open the door. Hearing this, Peter got up silently and walked towards the door. As soon as the door was opened, Harry laughed happily. Peter, I'm coming to your house for dinner again. Hearing this, Peter rolled his eyes again and said angrily, do you still know that you are here to eat? How many times have you come here this month? Do you really think of this place as a canteen? Don't worry about these details. Harry laughed and hugged his friend, and then the two of them came to the living room together. Seeing Harry's arrival, Chen Luo stood up with a smile and hugged him. Harry, you are welcome to come back for dinner again. Hearing Chen Luo's teasing, Harry smiled happily, and then handed the gift in his hand to Chen Luo. Chun, this is the red wine I specially brought from home. You must have it when you have time. Try it, it tastes really good. Speaking of this, Harry blinked at Chen Luo and said mysteriously, but it shouldn't be suitable now. Maybe it would be better to take it out and try it one day when Peter and I are not here. Definitely, by the way, this kind of red wine tastes better when 2 people drink it. Snapped. After patting the back of the other person's head very skillfully, Chen Luo reached out and hooked Harry's neck, exerting slight force, with a smile on his face. You boy, you look very skilled in this trick. Tell me honestly, have you used it before? No. How could it be? Harry shook his head quickly and said seriously, I have just entered high school, and I haven't even made an appointment. You can't slander me. You brat, how many times have I told you not to call me by my name? Call me uncle. That won't work. If you want me to change my mind, you should chase Aunt May first. Listening to the two people bickering, May suddenly had a blush on her face. Angrily, 4.1 glared at Chen Luo and finally said, I said, have you forgotten that I am still here? Forehead. The two of them were startled, looked at each other with awkward smiles, closed their mouths in unison, and sat down at the dining table. After finishing the meal, May stood up immediately, looked at Chen Luo, and said without any doubt, I'm going to wash the dishes, Chan. You should stay here with Peter and the others. Chen Luo was obviously used to May's actions. He shrugged his shoulders, did not refuse, and took Peter to the sofa to sit down. How's it going, boys? Are you satisfied with your high school life? I think it's fine. Harry shrugged and replied with a relaxed face. There's nothing wrong with me. Peter pushed up his glasses and replied. Looking at the expressions on the two people's faces, Chen Luo already knew it. Chapter 212, Part 1. Harry, I'm not too worried about what you said, but Peter, don't just focus on reading in school. You need to go out more and make more friends, you know? Yes, I understand. Peter nodded repeatedly, as if what you said made sense. You kid, don't deal with me. Chen Luo smiled and said, but don't have any psychological burden. I know what you were worried about. Don't worry, if anyone in the school dares to bully you, just come to me. Your uncle, I'll take care of it for you. Speaking of this, Chen Luo patted his chest and expressed domineeringly. Yes, I understand. I will give it a try. While Peter was dealing with Chen Luo, he looked at Harry. The two looked at each other in tacit understanding, feeling helpless. They have become familiar with Chen Luo in the past month. In addition to enjoying the meals cooked by Chen Luo, they also like to play with Chen Luo. To be honest, they really enjoy spending time with Chen Luo. But the only thing that makes them helpless is Chen Luo's habit of bragging. Although 08 Chen Luo has repeatedly stated that if he encounters any trouble, he can be solved by just asking him, but Peter had already told Harry about Chen Luo's situation. so they did not believe that he was picked up from an alley and brought home. What ability will Chen Luo have to help them? Therefore, they didn't take Chen Luo's words to heart at all. First 7. Harry waved his hand, then took out a box of game discs from behind with a mysterious look on his face, raised it to the two of them, and said, "This is the latest game I got. I guarantee you haven't played it. How about it? Do you want one?"
This?
Looking at the CD in Harry's hand, Peter was a little moved, but he still said with some hesitation, "But I have to read a book later." "Peter, what's the point of reading? Listen to me. Let's finish this fight together first. How about you read a book after we finish?" Seeing that Peter was still a little hesitant, Chen Luo smiled and put his arm around his shoulders. "Harry is right. Tomorrow is the weekend anyway, isn't it? Stop thinking about reading all day long. Sometimes you need to relax properly." After hearing Chen Luo's words, Peter thought for a while, then no longer refused and nodded in agreement. "Oh well. Yes. Then what are we waiting for? Let's go." Harry jumped up excitedly and looked at Chen Luo with a confident expression on his face. "Just be prepared. The final winner today must be me." Seeing the excited look on his face, Chen Luo and Chen looked at each other, with a smirk on their faces. Within the next 3 hours, when the door opened again, Harry, who had knelt down 20 times, slowly walked out of Peter's bedroom with stiff steps, his head lowered, his expression very depressed, and he didn't know what he was muttering, very unhappy. Left willingly. It turned out that he wanted to accompany Chen Luo and the others to continue fighting until dawn. However, after he received a call from his father, Harry did not dare to stay any longer and finally got up and left. After leaving Harry, Chen Luo returned home. After saying goodnight to Peter, Chen Luo also walked towards the bedroom where he was. Lying in bed, thinking about everything he had experienced these days, Chen Luo's heart became a little complicated. When he regained consciousness and opened his eyes, he found that he was in a strange environment. After learning about the situation from Mei, who was picking him up, Chen Luo realized that he had now arrived 8 years later. World. Chen Luo had no memory at all about all the memories of the past 8 years. The last scene in his mind at that time was the scene where he and Charles said goodbye. Through understanding, he was even more surprised to find that the person who saved him turned out to be the famous Spider-Man in the future, Peter Parker. As for how he determined the identity of the other party, he only needed to look at Aunt May on the side to know. After all, his name is Peter Parker, and both of his parents died when he was young. He was raised by May since he was a child. I'm afraid this is the only one. After understanding the other party's identity, Chen Luo felt nothing strange in his heart. He just made a mental note of the other party's help before planning to get up and leave. However, before he could make any move, Chen Luo seemed to suddenly remember something. With a thought, he quickly called up the system panel to check. Now he just remembered that it seemed that he had successfully killed Apocalypse 8 years ago. Since Apocalypse was dead, by now, system rewards should have been issued. The road to becoming a god. I don't know what kind of reward this is. Thinking of this, he also had strong expectations in his heart. With this idea in mind, when Chen Luo wanted to call up the panel, a prompt sound came from the system. Ding! Since the host has died before, the system has entered a dormant state. Do you want to reactivate it? Seeing this prompt, Chen Luo was also stunned. He also didn't expect that after his own death, the system would actively go into sleep, which meant that in order to receive his own rewards, he also needed to reactivate the system. I just don't know if there are any conditions required for this activation. With this thought in his mind, Chen Luo tentatively chose to activate. Ding! The system is being reactivated. System activation countdown. 30 days. Chen Luo. The good news is that he does not need to meet any conditions to activate the system this time, but the bad news is that it will take another month to activate the system this time. This means that he can only receive his own money after 1 month is over. 247 rewards. And apart from the fact that the system needed to be restarted, Chen Luo could clearly find that his current physical condition was also in an unprecedented state of weakness. If at his peak, his physical fitness was hundreds of times that of ordinary people, then according to his estimation, he would only have the strength of a Captain America at most. It is very simple to return to the peak as soon as possible. All he needs to do is drink a lot of blood. Can achieve. However, because the system has not yet been activated, the blood cup, an artifact, has been blocked in the portable space and cannot be taken out. Without the support of the blood cup, it will take quite a while for him to return to his peak. Since there is still a month left before the system is activated, Chen Luo is not in a hurry to leave. What he wants is to wait until a month later, when the system is successfully activated, and then use the blood cup to quickly restore himself to the peak, and then think about the next step. Action. With this idea in mind, within the next month, Chen Luo stayed with Mei and lived here with them. Until now, there is only 1 day left before the system is reactivated. Seeing the time decreasing step by step, Chen Luo can't help but become more and more excited. P.S. Level 1 is over, and we will soon enter the superhero era. I hope everyone will like this next volume. Chapter 213, Part 1. Soon, Time passed slowly with Chen Luo's expectation. Early the next morning, there were still 16 hours before the system was reactivated. Chen Luo got up on time, went to the kitchen and worked for a while, then knocked on May and Peter's door, calling them to come out for dinner. After breakfast, Peter raised his head, looked at Chen and May, and said, "Chen, Aunt May, I want to go to the library later and come back in the evening." Hearing this, Chen Luo was not surprised at all. After getting along with him for a month, Chen Luo also understood Peter's habits very well. It has to be said that before he became a real Spider-Man, Peter was just a good kid who loved learning. Perhaps because of his thin stature, he never looked very confident. Even though he has been in high school for a month, no one is willing to make friends with him except Harry, his good friend who grew up with him. However, Peter doesn't seem to care much about this. Peter, who grew up in a single-parent family, naturally understands how difficult it has been for Aunt May over the years. In order to ensure his healthy growth, May worked hard day and night. Over the years, she looked a lot more anxious. She is obviously only in her early 30s, but due to the intensity of her work, she looks much older than her actual age. Although she is still pursued by many men because of her good foundation, perhaps out of consideration for Peter's growth, she has never officially dated anyone else in these years. Peter has deeply remembered May's efforts in his heart. Although he wanted to help share some of the burden, he couldn't help much because he was too young. So the only thing he could do was to work harder. Just learning. In his mind, as long as he studies hard, he can be admitted to a good university in the future. In this way, after graduation, he will no longer need Aunt May to continue to contribute to him. On the contrary, he can rely on his ability to help Aunt May relieve her pain. Burden. With this idea in mind, Peter devoted most of his day to studying, and his study state was such that he forgot to eat and sleep. To be honest, at his age, who doesn't want to have fun and spend 10 colorful high school years without any worries? Peter is no exception, but he knows very well that he has no time to enjoy life now. Not for himself, even for Aunt May. He will never let the other person down. Therefore, as early as junior high school, Peter had developed the habit of going to the library to read on weekends. Not only May, but even Chen Luo, who had just arrived for nearly a month, was very aware of Peter's habit. Sure enough, after hearing that Peter was planning to go out, May nodded slightly with a soft smile on her face. "Then go ahead, Peter. But remember, go home early." "Well, I know." Peter nodded, then got up to leave. The moment he opened the door, Peter suddenly seemed to remember something, immediately turned around, winked at Chen Luo, and said loudly, "Chen, don't forget the red wine Harry gave you yesterday. Remember to get rid of it as soon as possible. Don't let Harry's heart down. Also, come on, Uncle Chen." After saying this, Peter quickly ran towards the door without waiting for the two of them to react. This kid, I don't know what's going on in my head every day. Looking at the other person's quickly disappearing figure, Chen Luo shook his head helplessly and cursed with a smile. After saying this, Chen Luo rolled his eyes and glanced calmly at May beside him, whose face was slightly red. Seeing the other party's behavior, Chen Luo's heart suddenly moved. He pretended to cough and said, May, actually I think Peter is right. I've seen that bottle of red wine. It's really valuable. It's a waste just to keep it there. Why don't we try it together? How about it?" Hearing Chen Luo's words, May's face became darker and she couldn't help but roll her eyes at him without saying a word. Seeing her reaction, Chen Luo immediately understood what the other party was thinking. A smile appeared on his face and he said, "I'll call Harry later and ask Peter to spend the night at his house tonight. They are friends after all, and they really need to communicate more." May couldn't help it anymore and laughed out loud. She looked at Chen Luo and said, "Chen, do you believe what you said?" "I definitely believe it," Chen Luo said with a serious face. "If I can't even deceive myself, then how can I deceive? No, how about convincing Peter?" Haha. Seeing Chen Luo's serious explanation, May's happy smile suddenly spread across the room. That night, after a pleasant candlelight dinner, Chen Luo also brought May to the room to do some after-dinner exercises. A few hours later, the exhausted May had already fallen asleep. As for Chen Luo, even though his current physique was not at its peak before, it was still several times that of an ordinary person, so this was not a problem for him. But these are trivial matters. The reason why he refused to rest until early in the morning was also very simple. His system's countdown has reached the final stage. Looking at the numbers displayed on the dark system panel, Chen Luo began to think silently. 10, 9, 6, 3, 2, 1, 0. As soon as this thought, Dinua, flashed through my mind, a prompt sound came from the system. The countdown is over. The system has been reactivated. Hearing the news, Chen Luo couldn't help but feel a hint of joy in his eyes. Now that the system has been reactivated, it means that his blood cup can be used again. With the help of this artifact, he will be able to return to his peak condition as quickly as possible. As long as his strength recovers, he will be able to set off to find those old friends by then. And since he hasn't been able to show up for so many years, I guess they are also worried, right? Familiar faces like Nissa, Erica, Serena, Eva, Mavis, and Chen kept reappearing in Chen Luo's mind. Thinking that they hadn't seen each other for 8 years, Chen Luo suddenly thought Luo's heart is also very complicated. Just when Chen Luo was sighing secretly, the system's voice came again. Chapter 214, Part 1. Ding! It has been detected that Apocalypse is dead, and rewards will be distributed now. The road to becoming a god begins. It is detected that the host's physical attributes have not reached the limit of a mortal, and the path to becoming a god in the flesh cannot be opened. It is detected that the host's spiritual attributes have reached the limit of mortals, and the road to becoming a god begins. The first step on Law's path to becoming a god, gathering the godhead. Conditions for generating godhead. Collecting more than 1 million souls can generate godhead. Note: the higher the quality of the soul, the stronger the generated godhead. In addition, only after the godhead is successfully condensed, the restrictions on mental attributes will be lifted. Chen Luo. That's it. After waiting for a long time, and finally not waiting for any further prompts from the system, Chen Luo's face fell, and he couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. Originally, he thought that after solving Apocalypse, the reward for becoming a god would be able to further his strength, but now it seems that it is of no use. On the contrary, this reward is more like giving you a key to continue to become stronger. Not to mention how many steps there are on the road to becoming a god, and how far he can grow to in the end, I will only talk about the first step. As long as he can successfully condense his godhead, his spiritual power will go one step further and reach another level. 26 times. Divided by the levels of mutants, that is the level of 5th level mutants. With his mental power exceeding 500 points, although there may be some differences between Charles, who was briefly promoted to the 5th level mutant and possesses the power of the mind, it is not too different after thinking about it. By then, with the increase in mental power, his strength will also be improved by huge amounts. Although due to the difference in ability, his power cannot completely destroy the human world like Eric and Charles, but in Chen Luo's view, no matter how good he was at that time, he would still have the power to fight on his own. The terrifying power of a great country. It can even cause huge amounts of threats to the whole world. Although there may still be a big gap between this kind of power and the real gods, those who can reach this level may be no different from gods in some respects. To describe it more accurately, perhaps it would be more appropriate to call the powerful in this realm demigods. Although he knows that after becoming a demigod, his strength will be greatly improved, but looking at the prompts on the system, if he wants to reach this state, he must first complete the first task on the road to becoming a god, condense godhead. To be honest, when he saw A.B. the following introduction on how to condense the godhead, Chen Luo's heart immediately went cold. According to the above statement, if he wants to condense his godhead, he needs to collect the souls of millions of people. How can he get such a large amount? And even if he had the ability to do it, would he have to kill innocent people just for this godhead? You must know that Chen Luo is not actually a very murderous person. The reason why he caused so many casualties before was because the other party provoked him first, and then he chose to take action. If the other party had no grievances against him, Chen Luo would not think about killing the other party and collecting his soul. Unless someone in this world suddenly goes crazy and calls on an entire international metropolis, or even the population of a country to fight against Chen Luo, then it may be possible to successfully collect millions of souls. In addition to this, Chen Luo also noticed the prompt given by the system. The higher the quality of the soul, the stronger the generated godhead. This is also obvious. If you use the soul of an ordinary person to condense the godhead, the generated godhead may be very weak. Certainly. But how does this system identify the quality of souls? Is it possible that it depends on strength? Chen Luo couldn't figure it out and immediately asked the system. And the system's answer was just as he expected. The quality of the soul is really related to strength. So if Chen Luo doesn't want the quality of his future godhead to be too poor, he has to find people with higher strength to collect their souls. If there is anyone on this earth who is stronger than humans, Chen Luo thinks there are only 3 races left: vampires, werewolves, and mutants. Do we still need to collect their souls? Chen Luo's face darkened, and he gave up the idea decisively. Not to mention that vampires and werewolves are now loyal to him. Even the mutant group, whether it is Eric or Charles, Chen Luo maintains good relations with them. So it is obvious that Chen Luo still does not want to take action against them. And not to mention that he doesn't want to take action. Even if he wants to take action, the total number of the 3 tribes cannot reach 1 million. Even if all their souls are collected, I'm afraid it won't be able to achieve the requirement of condensing the godhead. It seems I can only find another way. Chen Luo sighed secretly in his heart. But just the first step on the road to becoming a god is so difficult, which makes Chen Luo feel helpless. Looking at the prompts from the system, he can't imagine that the second step in the future, or even what kind of difficulties will you encounter in the third step. Thinking of this, Chen Luo frowned slightly. Just as he lowered his head and thought, Chen Luo suddenly remembered something. He had been looking at the conditions for becoming a god just now, and he had almost forgotten the top message. Become a god in the flesh? What is this? Is there any difference between it and the law becoming a god? Although the system did not answer his question, based on his understanding, perhaps the physical god represents pure physical strength, while the legal god may be more focused on energy attacks. The two have different emphases, and it is hard to say. What is the difference between strong and weak? By the way, system, if my physical attributes reach the limit, can I also start the path to becoming a god in my physical body? There shouldn't be any conflict between the two, right? Not really. Is that so? Then if another path is opened, will the conditions for becoming a god in the flesh be the same as those in law? After Chen Luo said this softly, suddenly, as if he thought of something again, he asked with some expectation. If this is the case, then he may be able to accumulate his physique to the limit first, and then start the road to becoming a god in the physical body, and then consider completing the first step of the task. Then he may be able to satisfy both requirements on the road to becoming a god at the same time. Condition. The conditions between the two are different, and they cannot reach an agreement. After hearing the system's answer, Chen Luo curled his lips in displeasure and reluctantly gave up the plan. After continuing to watch the panel for a while, Chen Luo finally closed the panel and then turned his palm over. Following his actions, the next moment, Chen Luo's personal space opened instantly, and the blood cup that had been sealed for 8 years finally came to light and returned to Chen Luo's hands. Looking at the artifact in his hand, Chen Luo's eyes flickered, and he was filled with anticipation. Then, the next step is up to you. Thinking that he would be able to return to his peak condition soon, Chen Luo was excited and at the same time a little impatient. Then another week passed. That night, after a week of continuous efforts and using a blood cup to consume a large amount of blood, Chen Luo's body finally recovered again. Chapter 215, Part 1. Finally recovered. Looking at his hands, feeling the constant strength in his body at this moment, Chen Luo sighed softly, his face full of emotion. 8 years have passed. When Chen Luo self-destructed and died, the system disappeared with it. Until now, after 8 years, with the help of the ability of Chen Luo's bloodline source, Chen Luo finally reappeared in the world. And within a month after his recovery, the system finally restarted. When the system was activated, Chen Luo also used the power of the blood cup to quickly restore his body to its peak state. Now, Chen Luo feels that his strength is even better than before. As soon as I thought about it, I immediately opened the system panel and started checking. Host, Chen Luo race, source blood clan strength, 180, 1 for a healthy adult male, speed, 70, 499.9 physique, 150 skills, fighting technique, high, knife skills master, Proxima midnight magic, high ability, super speed regeneration, blood control, steel body, assimilation, blood source, memory reading, bat transformation, dark favor, teleportation, energy to quantity conversion evaluation. The road to becoming a god has begun. Congratulations, you have taken a firm step on the road to becoming a god. Looking at the content displayed on the panel, Chen Luo's eyes flashed. In terms of skills and abilities, there are no changes as before. However, in terms of attributes, except for the mental attributes that have reached the current limit, the other 3 attributes have increased to a certain extent. As for the reasons why these attributes have increased, Chen Luo also knew it well. When Chen Luo was planning to die together with Apocalypse, he used his own energy conversion ability and began to crazily absorb the energy escaping from the opponent's body. At the same time, he also began to strengthen his own physique. In the end, although the energy on the opponent's body completely exceeded his absorption limit, before he could bear it no longer, Chen Luo could also feel that his physique had been strengthened to a considerable extent. Because strength and speed are also closely related to physical fitness, as physical fitness increases, these 2 attributes also increase to varying degrees. Compared with the previous attributes, in just that one absorption and transformation, Chen Luo's 3 attributes added up to a huge increase of nearly 100 points. Such huge amounts of income made Chen Luo secretly shake his head and sigh. How great would it be if something like this could happen more often? If it could happen dozens or hundreds of times, then my physical attributes would probably be able to meet the standards of becoming a god in the flesh, right? Thinking of this, Chen Luo couldn't help but feel even more regretful. But no matter how pity it is, it's useless. After all, Chen Luo also knows that the harvest like before is completely accidental. If Charles hadn't temporarily controlled the other party, when the other party resumed action, he might not have been able to escape the fate of self-destruction. And even if he had self-destructed at that time, he might not be able to harm Apocalypse. In the end, the other party might have successfully conquered the world before he was resurrected. After learning the news of his death, if his tribesmen couldn't get over it and wanted to fight Apocalypse, then when they all died in each other's hands, he would be completely dead. Thinking of such consequences, Chen Luo woke up instantly and laughed in his heart. For a strong man like Apocalypse, if it weren't for the systematic help in the end, he might not be able to defeat the opponent. If he could win, it would be considered a fluke. As for the idea of treating the opponent as an experienced baby and quickly increasing his physical fitness, it is still a bit too much. Live your life innocently. Moreover, even without the existence of Apocalypse, he can still use energy absorbing to increase his physique, but the speed is just a little slower. With this time, Chen Luo can still afford it. So soon, Chen Luo put aside his regrets and started thinking about another thing. Now that 8 years have passed since his disappearance, he is not sure what changes have taken place in his old friends, so he will have to wait until he goes there to see them in person before he can find out. However, he did not find nothing during this period. Although he never set out to search, he still got some news that made him shine through the content on TV. There is no need to mention that Playboy Tony. Even after such a long time, news about him has never been missing from major media news. Chen Luo has long been accustomed to this. But it's also worth mentioning that after 8 years of development, Tony's Stark Group has truly become a giant with a market capitalization of trillions, with influence all over the world. Especially in the Eagle country, relying on Tony's genius scientific research ability to develop various high-tech weapons, the group not only received a large number of orders from the military, but also established close ties with it. In the military and government, both industries also have huge amounts of influence, and there are very few companies that can compete with them. Having such a giant company under his control, coupled with Tony's original Playboy and super genius attributes, has made him a veritable top player in the world. His every move can attract the attention of countless people. Such influence is far beyond the reach of even the heads of some small countries. 0. Please give me flowers. Seeing that his friend was living so well now, Chen Luo also secretly let go of his worries. In addition to Tony, there is another change in the world that also caught Chen Luo's attention. That is, among the United Nations agencies, an agency like the Mutant Ministry of Foreign Affairs was born. What surprised Chen Luo even more was that the minister of this agency was still an old acquaintance of his. Beast, Hank McCoy. To be honest, when he saw Hank wearing a formal suit and appearing at the United Nations General Assembly, Chen Luo was also confused. But then he quickly came to his senses, and after just a little thought, he understood the reason. There is no doubt that the reason for the emergence of this department is probably inseparable from the agreement negotiated between Scott and Fury. Definitely, the reason why countries around the world abide by the agreement is probably because they have scruples about the mutant family. After all, the Apocalypse incident back then was still very close. If Chen Luo and the others had not taken action, I am afraid that the power of Apocalypse would have destroyed the human world long ago. This terrifying power also shocked all countries in the world. After experiencing that incident, they didn't think about taking this opportunity to eliminate all the mutants to prevent threats like Apocalypse from coming again. But before they could take action, Fury immediately stood up and stopped them. The reason why Fury can stop them is very simple. If they really choose to take action, once a fierce resistance is caused by the mutant clan, and if an individual comparable to Apocalypse Magneto is born again in this group, then humanity will really be doomed. Because by that time, after learning about the attitude of humans, even mutants who are close to humans will not continue to provide help to humans. Without their power, humans will likely face another apocalypse crisis. Under such a possibility, countries around the world finally gave up their original ideas and decided to abide by the previous agreement with mutant and coexist peacefully with mutant. It is under such considerations that the Mutant Ministry of Foreign Affairs was established. As a party close to humanity, the position of Minister of Foreign Affairs will definitely be filled by someone from Xavier's school. Chapter 216, Part 1. Just like a few days ago, Chen Luo saw Hank chatting on TV, and it obviously didn't look like anything was wrong. So if Chen Luo guessed correctly, everything should be normal at the college. After thinking of this, Chen Luo suddenly became less worried. But in order to further confirm, he still needs to go back and take a look in person. It just so happened that May and Peter were both not at home today, either going to school or going to work, so Chen Luo planned to go back to the headquarters to take a look at these years before they go home. Edge changes. Although he has not returned to the headquarters in the past month, he is still in New York after all. With just a little inquiry, he can know the situation at the Edgewood building. After all, it is one of the famous buildings in the city. Regarding this building, many people still know the news. 653, after some inquiries, Chen Luo was relieved. According to other people, the development of the building has not changed much in the past few years. The headquarters is still headed by Craven. After these years of operation, although the other party does not appear often, you can still see news about the other party in New York newspapers. As long as he knew that the headquarters was still under the control of Craven, Chen Luo also understood that there should be nothing major happening there. In this case, Chen Luo was not in a hurry to go back, but planned to restore his body to its peak condition before setting off to return. And now, as he finally recovered, it was time to go back and take a look. It just so happens that he also has some things he wants to know from Craven. Thinking of this, Chen Luo's eyes flashed, and then, his figure swayed and disappeared in the living room in an instant. After using his teleportation ability, Chen Luo arrived at his destination in less than 10 seconds. Without stopping at the door, He teleported directly to the top floor of the Edgewood building and walked towards Craven's office according to his past memories. At the same time, Office C where Craven is located. Right in front of Craven, two figures were standing motionless. Looking at the cold faces of the two people, Craven broke out in cold sweat on his forehead. His face was stiff. He smiled awkwardly and asked, "Selena, Eva, long time no see. I haven't seen you for such a long time. How come you have time to come here to see me today?" Standing in front of Craven at this moment were Serena and Serena, who had been in John the Cow Country for 8 years. Although 8 years have passed, as vampires, time has not affected them at all. They still look as beautiful and dazzling as they did 8 years ago. "Why did I come to you? What do you think?" Next to Serena, Eva slowly spoke, looking at the other party with a half-smile on her face and said, "If I remember correctly, this has been 8 years, right? Didn't you tell us that Chen has been cultivating, so he can't see us? So what now? We have all come over. Even if Chen doesn't have time now, let's go see him. This should be okay, right?" At this time, Serena on the side also said in time, "My mission there has been completed. I came here today and I don't plan to leave. Craven, tell me where Chen is practicing now. I'll go there. Wait for him." Speaking of this, a cold light flashed in Serena's eyes, and in the large office, invisible wind spurted out from her body and swept across all directions in an instant. "Or are you hiding something from us?" Just 1 year after Chen Luo disappeared, after not receiving any news from Chen Luo for such a long time, Serena and Eva also contacted Craven with confused faces. At that time, Craven he had also received news from Raven a long time ago. After learning that Chen Luo and Apocalypse died together, it took him a long time to accept this reality. Although he no longer felt that Chen Luo could return again, the words from Charles still gave him the last bit of confidence. With the last hope, he also planned to keep this secret to himself, and then announced to the public that Chen Luo was practicing in seclusion, and he might not be able to meet with everyone in the short term. It was precisely because of Craven's reason that Nessa, Serena, and Mavis, who had not seen Chen Luo for a long time, calmed down and decided to continue waiting. However, 7 years later, they still haven't heard any news about Chen Luo, which immediately aroused their doubts and dissatisfaction. During this time, they have been coming here from time to time, asking Craven to inform Chen Luo. Traces of Luo. He had just comforted Mavis and Erica 2 days ago, and before he could breathe a sigh of relief, today, Serena and Eva also came to the door at the same time to ask Craven. Obviously, after such a long time, they could no longer wait any longer, and their uneasiness became more and more serious. This time, Serena and the others came all the way from the European base camp to ask Craven. Ask clearly. If the other party still dares to prevaricate them, then Serena will no longer be polite to the other party, and using force may be her only option. Feeling the fierce momentum on the other side, Craven was also frightened, and his scalp couldn't help but feel numb. He forced a laugh, and was about to speak and continue to delay. Suddenly, the door handle behind the 3 people began to turn, and then the door slowly opened. "Craven, you are?" Chen Luo opened the door and walked in, and was about to speak. However, the next moment, when he saw the situation in the room, he was startled for a moment, and then said with some surprise, "Selena, Eva, why are you here?" Seeing the figure of the incoming person, the 3 of them were shocked, except for Craven's eyes, which were full of horror, as if he had seen a ghost. Serena and Eva both had surprised looks on their faces at the same time, and they all crossed over. Craven walked quickly in the direction of 2.3 Chen Luo. List. Arriving in front of Chen Luo, Serena looked Chen Luo up and down. A bright smile instantly appeared on her cold and beautiful face. Without waiting for Chen Luo to answer, Serena reached out and hugged Chen Luo tightly, as if she was afraid that he would leave again. "Finally, you have shown up. Chen, long time no see." Eva on the side also had a smile on her face. "It seems that you have finally finished practicing, but I really didn't expect that you would practice for such a long time. How is it? What's the gain?" "Practice?" Hearing this, the smile on Chen Luo's face froze, and doubts subconsciously appeared in his eyes. Not good. Seeing this, Craven behind him jumped in his heart and quickly planned to stand up and explain. Chapter 217, Part 1. However, before he could speak, Chen Luo's voice came first. "Sorry for making you worry. I did sleep for a long time this time." "Sleep? Chen, aren't you practicing?" After hearing this, the smile on Eva's face froze, as if she thought of something. She turned her head and looked behind her, with an incomprehensible look in her eyes. "Or, Craven, what do you have to hide from us?"
This?
Facing Eva's gaze, Craven's expression became even stiffer. "Eva, don't blame him for this. It's my fault." Looking at Craven's expression, Chen Luo understood something and took the initiative to save him. "Actually, the reason why Craven said this is just to prevent you from worrying. The reason why I haven't contacted you these years is because I have been recovering from my injuries these years." Hearing this, The expressions of the two changed instantly. They looked at Chen Luo with worry in their eyes and hurriedly said, Qian, are you injured? What's going on? Has the injury healed now? Don't worry, everything has recovered. Chen Luo smiled and comforted softly. I don't think Craven has told you this. In fact, 8 years ago, I was... After briefly explaining the experience 8 years ago to the two of them, Chen Luo finally said, at the end, Apocalypse was a bit difficult to deal with. Although he successfully dealt with him, I paid a price. I finally recovered from my deep sleep. Speaking of this, Chen Luo shifted his gaze to Craven and said, actually, I can't blame Craven for this. After all, I didn't have time to tell him about it. In order not to worry you, so he can only make up such a reason. Apocalypse? After hearing Chen Luo's explanation, the two people's faces were immediately filled with surprise. They were very impressed with this name. After all, it was the character who almost ruled the world 8 years ago. If a group of mutants who became X-Men came out to stop it, the world might not be what it is today. After learning that Apocalypse had been successfully eliminated, they all heaved a sigh of relief. But they never expected that the disappearance of Apocalypse would have a huge amount of relationship with Chen Luo. After learning that the death of Apocalypse was Chen Luo's handiwork, the two of them were surprised. But they also understood that Chen Luo would spend so many years recovering from his injuries. After all, that is a strong man with the power to destroy the world. Fighting against such a strong man, being able to survive successfully is already the greatest luck. Paying some price is also a normal thing. But understanding is understanding. After learning the real reason why Chen Luo disappeared for 8 years, the two of them also had a little fear in their hearts. Chen, you clearly know the power of Apocalypse. Why do you still want to deal with him? Aren't you afraid that something will happen to you? Serena stared straight at Chen Luo, her eyes full of worry. So, if something like this happens again in the future, I will face it with you. Looking at Serena's cold and stubborn face at this moment, Chen Luo's heart moved, and his eyes became softer. Reaching out and caressing the other person's face, Chen Luo smiled and said, don't worry, Serena. The reason why I chose to do this is because I have the certainty of winning in my heart. I am not as weak as you think. Don't forget, I am also very fishy. And I have my own reasons for doing this. If I don't make a move and Apocalypse continues, then you may also be in danger. So even for you, I must choose to make a move. List. Hearing this, Serena's eyes flashed with light, and her heart was suddenly moved. Serena easily believed Chen Luo's words, but this may not be the case for Eva. Oh, really? Eva looked at Chen Luo, blinked her charming eyes, and chuckled. Then, Chun, you can explain to me, since you want to deal with Apocalypse, then why do you want to work with those X-Men? And I don't think I've ever heard you mention, what's your connection to the X-Men gang before? Speaking of this, a hint of surprise appeared on Eva's face, and she looked at him with a half-smile. Oh, by the way, I suddenly remembered that I seem to have seen that group of people in an interview a few years ago. If I remember correctly, there seem to be 2 beauties among them. What are their names? Let me think. By the way, they are called Qin and Aurora, right? I wonder if you, Chun, are familiar with the 2 of them? Eva is not as easy to deceive as Serena. Judging from her understanding of Chen Luo, the reason why he went with the X-Men gang to deal with Apocalypse must be related to the 2 people she mentioned just now. Regarding this, she has sufficient confidence. Chen Luo. Just when he was having a headache trying to figure out how to explain it, Serena's faint voice sounded beside him. Chen, is what Eva said just now true? Ahem. Chen Luo coughed dryly. In the end, he couldn't bear to continue lying to her, so he bit the bullet and was about to explain. However, before he could speak, the next moment, there was a sudden sharp pain in his waist. When he looked down, it was Serena who had reached out and pinched his waist hard at some point, and then coldly he snorted and said, I advise you to tell me the truth, otherwise you should understand what consequences will follow. Seeing the cold light flashing in the other person's eyes, Chen Luo showed a stiff smile and said with a smile, Selena, how could I lie to you? Don't worry, I will tell you everything you want to know. Then, without her having to ask any questions, Chen Luo truthfully told the truth about his crime, not only with Qin, but also with Mei in the past month. So after you woke up, you didn't think about contacting us immediately, right? After listening to Chen Luo's 423 explanation, Serena's face became colder and colder, and the look she looked at Chen Luo became even more unkind. Selena, you can't blame him for this. At this time, Eva stood up and spoke for Chen Luo. Chen Luo was indeed right. His strength had not fully recovered at that time. If he showed up rashly, what if someone knows about it? You may indeed be in danger. Yeah. Chen Luo nodded quickly, and at the same time he did not forget to cast an admiring look at Eva. But, however, before he could be happy for a long time, Eva suddenly changed the subject and looked at Chen Luo with the same evil look in her eyes. I didn't expect it. In just 1 month, someone developed a new relationship so quickly. This speed is really unusually fast. I think I finally understand why Chen and Tony are good friends. It seems that in some aspects, your hobbies are really consistent. Well, yes, that's right. It's Tony's fault. He took me to parties every day, and that's why I became like this. Oh, I really regret it. If I had known that I would become like this, I would have broken up with that guy long ago. While saying this, Chen Luo shook his head sadly, his eyes full of anger and helplessness, and he looked full of annoyance. Seeing Chen Luo's performance, Serena and Eva looked at each other and rolled their eyes in unison. Chapter 218, Part 1. Although they were still a little unhappy, they didn't do anything else. After all, when they accepted Chen Luo, they already knew in their hearts that this man could only occupy a part of himself, so they quickly calmed down. After the three of them reminisced about old times for a while, Chen Luo finally seemed to remember something. He turned to look at Craven aside and said, "By the way, Craven, I forgot to ask you, how has your place been developing in the years since I was gone? Nothing else happened in the family, right?" "No, Master Chen Luo, everything is fine." Seeing that Chen Luo finally asked him, Craven did not dare to neglect and quickly stepped forward to answer. Later, after the other party's narration, Chen Luo also got a rough idea of the family's development over the years. After several years of cleansing and absorption, with Blade and Lucian fighting all day long, all the vampire forces in the world have been wiped out by the two of them, and countless vampires have died in their hands. After killing nearly half of the vampires, the remaining vampires no longer dared to continue resisting the Chen Luo family and chose to join it. So far, according to Craven's statistics, the number of vampires in the Chen Luo family has reached an astonishing 300,000. There are about 100,000 vampires dispersed in each of the 3 vampire gathering places in Eagle Sauce Country, Northern Bear Country, and Europe, which looks very even. And because Chen Luo had long used the blood cup to leave a huge blood pool in the 3 directions, the vampire clan no longer had to hunt humans for food in recent years, and they had transferred to various major groups under Chen Luo to work. Definitely, because Chen Luo did not come forward to transform these vampires, most of the vampires in the Chen Luo family still cannot overcome the weakness of sunlight and can only come out at night. In addition to the increase in the number of vampires, on the other hand, after Chen Luo disappeared, Craven, under Chen Luo's instructions before leaving, took the initiative to join forces with Tony. The two groups exchanged shares with each other, thus forming a real strategic alliance. Therefore, with the help of Tony's scientific research advantages, Chen Luo's group has also achieved considerable development over the years, and its assets have exceeded 2 trillion. Even in the world, it can be said to be one of the well-deserved giants. However, this is only a small part of the cooperation between the two parties, and more is about the joint development on Skull Island. You must know that 8 years ago, Tony had successfully developed a vehicle that could freely enter and leave Skull Island. Therefore, after the Battle of Apocalypse, Tony spent nearly a year expanding the number of aircraft to hundreds. Let's all head to Skull Island. At that time, in order to protect Tony's safety, Craven also went with Blade, Lucian, and the others. After arriving on Skull Island, the 3 of them were shocked by the environment there. After seeing that ancient creatures like dinosaurs still existed on the island, Craven's first idea at the time was to transform the island into a Jurassic Park and bring all the creatures on the island to life, captivity, and then use it to make a lot of profits. But as soon as his idea was proposed, it was rejected by Tony. Based on the original idea between him and Chen Luo, Tony decided to develop the island into a secret base that belonged exclusively to the two of them. In order to ensure King Kong's safety, Tony even ordered others not to leak the secrets of the island. Except for Tony, the rest of the group on this trip were all vampire elites from the Chen Luo family. The reason why they did not bring other humans here was to prevent them from revealing the secrets of Skull Island when they returned. As for the vampires, they have no such worries. After all, families are different from companies, and their centripetal force and loyalty are fully guaranteed. In addition, these people come here this time, and they have no intention of going back in a short time, but will stay and belong to Tony. Deploy and develop this island. After hearing that this was also Chen Luo's idea, Craven decisively gave up his original idea of developing it into a park and began to fully cooperate. It has now been about 7 years since the development started. With Tony's deployment and the hard work of the vampire elites, the development of Skull Island is about to be completed. According to the news from Tony, the most I can think of is it only takes about 2 months to get it done. After saying this, under the murderous gazes of Serena and the others, Craven bit the bullet and reported the information about Xavier's school to Chen Luo. Since Chen Luo left, Chen basically stayed in the college teaching students all day, but would come to the building every month or so to ask Craven if he had found Chen Luo's whereabouts. Rain or shine, unshakable, even after 8 years, she has no intention of giving up. In addition to Chen, what surprised Craven was that Raven also came here from time to ask him about Chen Luo's whereabouts. After learning the news, as expected, Chen Luo received a blank stare from the two of them. In addition, after Mavis and Erica learned about Chen Luo's practice, they didn't pay too much attention to it at first, but after a few months, they also felt that something was wrong. Contact Craven again to inquire. Over the past few years, Craven's excuse has become less and less effective. Like Serena and the others, the two of them were also increasingly worried about the whereabouts of Chen Luo. They often came to see Craven for confirmation. After several attempts to no avail, Erica even got into a big fight with him. Jean Craven was also a little tired of dealing with it. As for the North Bear Country, Nissa is the leader of the vampire forces there. So even though she is also very concerned about Chen Luo's whereabouts, she can't spare any time to visit him. However, judging from the fact that the calls from the other party have become more and more frequent in the past few months, I think it won't be long before the other party is very likely to be unable to hold back and, like Serena and the others, come directly to look for her. After hearing what the other party said, Chen Luo nodded clearly to express his understanding. I understand. You don't have to worry about these things. Just leave them to me. I will contact them later. Then I still have something to do here, so you can go about your business and I'll leave first. After saying this, Chen Luo stood up quickly. He was afraid that the other party would have some breaking news, so he didn't dare to stay too long. He pulled Serena beside him and walked quickly towards the door. Looking at Chen Luo's leaving figure, Craven finally breathed a sigh of relief. Over the years, as Erica and the others came to search for him more and more frequently, the pressure on him also increased. If Chen Luo hadn't appeared in time now, he wouldn't have known how to explain it to others in the future. Fortunately, it's all over. After seeing Chen Luo standing in front of him safe and sound, Craven felt a little more in awe of Chen Luo after a brief moment of disbelief. According to Charles's account at the time, in order to eliminate Apocalypse, Chen Luo used self-destruction and finally died together with the other party. Originally, he had already accepted the fact of Chen Luo's death in his heart, but he did not expect that he would be able to see it 8 years later. Until the other party appears again. This performance is just like regenerative healing factor. Originally, in the past few years, when he became more and more sure that Chen Luo would not come back, Craven also had other thoughts in his mind. That is, because Blade and the others still existed in the headquarters, he did not dare to have any other thoughts. Little action stock. Now that he thinks about it, Craven feels a little grateful. Chapter 219, Part 1. The Queen. At May's home, May, who had just returned from get-off work, was a little confused after seeing Chen Luo missing in the house. The next moment, the phone in the living room rang. Hey, who is this? Chen? Where are you now? Why haven't you come home yet? So that's how it is. Okay, I understand. Then you should be careful outside and remember to come back early. Don't worry, I'll leave the dinner to me. I haven't cooked for Peter for a long time, and he should miss it very much. Chen, don't underestimate me. I don't only know how to make mashed potatoes. If you don't believe me, I'll show you when you come back. My cooking skills may not be worse than yours. On the other end of the phone, in the luxurious villa where Chen Luo was also located in Queens, hearing May's somewhat annoyed voice, Chen Luo laughed and nodded repeatedly. Then I'd like to try it. Don't worry, I will go back the day after tomorrow at most. During this time, the family will trouble you. Chen Luo put down the phone, got up and went to the bedroom. He looked at Serena, who were sleeping soundly at the moment. Seeing that they were not about to wake up, a soft smile appeared on his face and he slowly closed the door. Then with a thought, he disappeared into the villa in an instant. More than 10 hours have passed since Chen Luo and the others left the building. In this short period of time, Chen Luo accompanied Serena and the others to fight until the night, and it was only now that they were finally able to escape. Then 700 Chen Luo kept moving, contacted Nisha, Erica, and the others one after another, reported that they were safe, and temporarily comforted them. Then he said hello to May, saying that he would go back in 2 days, and then I plan to start setting off. This time his destination is not elsewhere. It is Xavier's school where Chen is now. 8 years have passed in the blink of an eye since the last time we met, and the scenes before they parted are still replaying in Chen Luo's mind. Every time, he can't help but feel a touch of regret in his heart. At the beginning, I left in such a hurry that I didn't even have time to say goodbye to her. Now that I think about it, I feel sorry for her. With this in mind, Chen Luo immediately used his teleportation ability and rushed towards the destination at full speed. Under his full speed, it only took less than a few minutes, and with a sudden wave of fluctuations in the air, the next moment, Chen Luo's figure instantly appeared at the gate of the college. Fortunately, it is night now, and the sudden appearance of Chen Luo did not attract anyone's attention. Striding towards the gate of the college, at this time, even though the time has reached 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening, the students here have no intention of going back to rest so early. They go out one after another, on the grass outside, or walking through the forest trails in the shade. Except for a very few single figures, most people walk together in pairs, holding hands, and the two figures were close together, with happy smiles on their faces. From time to time, students passed by Chen Luo. When they took advantage of the lights on the road to see Chen Luo's appearance, although they felt that they had never seen this face before, they saw Chen Luo nodding and smiling at them, with a natural look on his face. The appearance of walking on the road instantly dispelled their doubts in their hearts. They also greeted each other with a smile, and then both parties disappeared into the darkness ahead. Definitely, not all the students Chen Luo met felt that Chen Luo's face was familiar, and most of these people were the teenagers who were still in the academy 8 years ago. But even so, after so long, after a while, their memory of Chen Luo was also a little fuzzy, so they didn't recognize Chen Luo's identity. But the only thing that is certain is that even if they have never seen Chen Luo in the academy, looking at Chen Luo's familiarity, they have no doubts about Chen Luo, and they have not stepped forward to ask. Idea. So, under such circumstances, Chen Luo arrived in front of the building where the college was located smoothly. Without stopping, he followed the memory in his mind and walked step by step towards the room where Qin was. On the other side, in the pavilion room. After finishing today's class, Qin went back to her room alone, never going out a step. 8 years have passed, but on Qin's face, there are no traces of time left at all, and on the contrary, it has added a bit of unique charm. Her long dark red hair fell down her shoulders. She sat quietly at the small solid wood table in front of her. There was a bottle of red wine on the table. She dragged her chin with one hand and shook the wine glass in her hand unconsciously, as if thinking, "What are you wearing?" This BCCI habit was something she slowly started to develop after Chen Luo left. Sitting at the table, even if she was alone every time, Qin would place 2 wine glasses on it. After quietly drinking all the red wine on the table, Qin could fall asleep peacefully. And the reason why she did this is also very simple. Just like now, Qin unconsciously shook the quilt in her hand, but her eyes were staring straight at the empty bench opposite, her face glowing with a soft luster, and her eyes full of nostalgia. "Chun, will you really come back?" Chen Luo's figure appeared in her mind again, recalling the past between the two of them, the scene when the two met for the first time, their first date, and the little picture sitting here today. At the table, she wanted to be like this now, holding a wine glass in her hand, having dinner with the other party. But that was all many years ago. Since Chen Luo left, no one else has sat in front of this solid wood table except her. "Chen, you guy, you left without even saying goodbye. It's been so many years now, haven't you ever thought about coming back? You promised me that you would definitely come back, right?" Boom, boom, boom. Just when Qin was a little distracted, the next moment, there was a clear knock on the door. The sound instantly woke her up, and she turned her head in confusion. After a while, she finally came back to her senses. Her face regained its calmness. She slowly got up and walked towards the door. "Please wait." Hold the door handle and slowly open the door. Later, when Qin saw clearly the appearance of the person outside the door, she was suddenly shocked. She stared blankly in front of her. Her mouth opened and closed unconsciously, and she wanted to say something, but she couldn't say a word. Outside the door, Chen Luo looked at the familiar face in front of him, with a slight smile on his face, and said, "Long time no see, Qin. Sorry to keep you waiting. Now, I'm back." Listening to the voice coming from her ears, Qin finally came back to her senses and looked straight at Chen Luo. Her face gradually became excited. She reached out and touched Chen Luo's face in disbelief, and her trembling voice sounded, "Chun, is it really you? You are finally back." "It's definitely me." Chen Luo stretched out his hand, took the other person's hand in his, and then pulled her into the door. After closing the door, Chen Luo glanced at the familiar small wooden table in the room and the 2 wine glasses on the table. His face was slightly startled, and he reacted instantly. Apologizing even more deeply, he pulled the other person to the table and sat down, filled his glass with red wine, and then slowly raised his glass to signal. "So, do you want to celebrate for me?" Watching Chen Luo's movements, the smile on Qin's face bloomed and became brighter. He also raised his wine glass and touched it lightly with Chen Luo. His eyes flashed brightly, and the corners of his mouth curved, and he whispered softly, "Definitely." Chapter 220, Part 1. The next morning, when Qin appeared in front of Charles and others with Chen Luo, everyone was even more shocked. Although they were surprised that Chen Luo could survive such a horrific nuclear explosion, because of the precedent of Charles, they quickly accepted this fact and were very happy for Chen Luo. Therefore, in order to catch up with Chen Luo, Charles even decided to give the children a day off this morning. This decision actually aroused cheers from the entire college. It was not until noon, after Chen Luo said that he had other things to deal with, that everyone reluctantly said goodbye to him. After saying goodbye to everyone, Chen Luo and Qin took a walk and came to the entrance of the college. "Okay, just send it here, Qin. I will come back to see you often in the future." Looking ahead, Chen Luo turned to Qin and smiled, then waved his hand, planning to say goodbye. However, just as he was about to leave, the next moment, Qin's faint voice came. "Qin, why do you look so anxious to leave? Are you busy looking for Erica and the others?" As soon as these words came out, Chen Luo stopped immediately, and cold sweat began to break out on his forehead. Turning back stiffly, struggling to move the corners of his mouth, Chen Luo forced a smile. "Qin, what are you talking about? Why can't I understand?" "Don't you understand?" Chen looked at Chen Luo quietly, smiled slightly, and then said, "Since you are not familiar with the name Erica, what about Mavis? Serena? Or Eva?" After saying these names, Chen's face gradually returned to calmness. She could not seem to calm down and spoke calmly. "Aren't you familiar with these names?" Chen Luo. Well, there was no need for him to continue guessing. Obviously, Chen now knew all about his other relationships. Knowing that he could no longer hide it, Chen Luo took a deep breath, apologetically in his eyes, and was about to explain something. "You don't need to explain any of this." Unexpectedly, before he could speak, he saw Chen gently waving her hands, and her eyes towards Chen Luo were gradually filled with tenderness. "Those are not important anymore. As long as I can see you come back safely, that's enough." Hearing this, Chen Luo was slightly startled, and an inexplicable warmth suddenly flowed in his heart. After a moment of silence, he walked forward, gently held the other person in his arms, and said in a deep voice, "Don't worry, Chen, I will never leave you again." Chen snuggled in Chen Luo's arms, quietly without saying a word, and just nodded lightly. As for how Chen learned about the existence of other people, the reason is actually very simple. On his way to find Craven a few years ago, he accidentally met Erica and Mei, who also came to inquire about the whereabouts of Chen Luo. Weiss both. At first, the two sides were relatively peaceful, but when they saw each other coming to the door of Craven's office, Erica and the others finally noticed something and took the initiative to ask. It was at this moment that Chen became aware of the existence of others. After learning the news, Chen's mood undoubtedly became worse. However, in the process of getting along with Erica and the others, Chen also became a little open to them after realizing their personalities. Good impression. Definitely, and more importantly, after Chen Luo chose to die with Apocalypse in order to save herself, Chen could no longer forget Chen Luo's figure in her heart, and as time went by, she gradually accepted this fact in her heart. Especially now that she has seen Chen Luo come back safely, she has become even more indifferent to this. In her current thoughts, as long as Chen Luo still exists in his heart, then the rest is not important. "Then go quickly." Released his hands, Chen looked at Chen Luo with a gentle face and said with a smile, "If you have time in the future, come back here and have a look. I will wait for you here." "I see." Chen Luo nodded lightly, said nothing more, turned around to say goodbye, and then strode forward. She quietly watched Chen Luo's leaving figure until he completely disappeared from her sight. After a long time, Chen finally turned around slowly and walked towards the college. After spending another day, using the ability to teleport, he went to the North Bear Country and the Monster Town, and after spending some time with Nissa and Erica, Chen Luo finally returned to New York again. The next morning, click, the door suddenly opened, and Chen Luo slowly walked into the living room. Because today was the weekend, both Mei and Peter were still at home. When they heard the noise coming from outside the door, the two of them perked up and turned around to look. "Past. Please give me flowers." "List." Peter's eyes lit up when he saw the person coming, and he quickly got up from the sofa and waved hello with a happy face. "Peter." Chen Luo walked forward, reached out and rubbed Peter's hair, and asked with a smile, "Why are you still at home today? Aren't you supposed to be in the library at this time?" "Don't mention it." Hearing Chen Luo's question, the smile on Peter's face faltered, and he instantly became a little listless. "I can't go today. I have to go to the room to clean up and see what things can be sold." "Huh? Selling something? What, Peter, are you short of money?" Chen Luo blinked subconsciously and asked with some confusion. "Chun, don't get me wrong." At this time, Mei, who was still reading the newspaper on the sofa, slowly stood up, took off the gold-rimmed glasses on the bridge of her nose, and explained with a smile, "Peter, it's not that he is short of money, it's just that in next week's class, their teacher held a practical class, and the practical content is what you see. So Peter needs to collect some old things from home, and then bring them to the class to introduce them, just like a small auction. Finally, the children will be graded based on who brings out the most valuable things, and then their performance will be scored." Speaking of this, Mei glanced at Peter subconsciously, and the smile on her face became even wider. But this is not easy for Peter. After all, he is reluctant to put any of the things in his house up for auction. So as you can see, he has been worried about it for almost a whole day now. Is that so? After listening, Chen Luo also understood what happened. After thinking about it, he turned to look at Peter and said with a smile, "That's it. I'll clean up with Peter and see what things are suitable at home. Don't worry, Peter, with me here, you will definitely get a high score in this practical class." "Really?" After hearing this, Peter's face suddenly became excited. He nodded quickly, and then he couldn't wait to pull Chen Luo to start the selection together. Looking at the two people leaving, Mei had a smile in her eyes, and her heart was filled with an inexplicable warmth. Chapter 221, Part 1. Monday morning. After breakfast, Peter said goodbye to Chen Luo, then picked up his school bag and planned to leave for school. "Be careful on the road, Peter." "I know, Aunt Mei." Outside the door, Peter was about to leave, but at this moment, he suddenly thought of something, and there was a faint look of embarrassment on his face. He looked at Chen Luo behind him who was escorting him out, and said with some hesitation, "Chen, do you really think that anyone would pay for that thing?" "Don't worry, Peter." Hearing this, a confident smile suddenly appeared on Chen Luo's face, and he patted the other party's shoulder gently. "I can guarantee you that as long as you take that thing out, someone will definitely want it. Don't underestimate yourself, Peter." Facing Chen Luo's encouraging gaze, Peter's originally hesitant heart suddenly cheered up, and he instantly regained his confidence. He nodded with 053 and said, "I see. Then I'll leave first. See you in the evening, Aunt Shan and May. See you tonight." After waving his hand with a smile and sending Peter away, Chen Luo closed the door and returned to the sofa to sit down. Seeing Chen Luo's leisurely look now, May beside him looked a little worried. "Chen, don't worry. What if what Peter prepared is not popular?" "May, don't worry. I've got it all done." Chen Luo smiled and comforted. "I have confidence in what Peter has prepared. As long as there is someone who knows the goods, I will definitely be willing to bid for it." After a pause, a different smile appeared on his face. "Besides, even if I really don't realize the value of this thing, I have already prepared the temple." "Huh." After hearing this, May's eyes suddenly lit up and she understood a little. "Chen, what do you mean?" "It seems you have guessed it." Chen Luo nodded with a smile. "I already called Harry last night. If it really comes to the last step, he will take care of everything. So that's it." After hearing Chen Luo's arrangement, Mei Xinxia finally breathed a sigh of relief, with a smile on her face. "Then I'll be relieved." "Okay, don't worry, Peter. Since that guy has already set off, it's our turn now." Chen Luo stood up, extended his right hand to the other party, bowed slightly, and made an invitation gesture. "So, beautiful Miss May, do you have time to go out on a date with me?" Looking at Chen Luo's movements, May's mouth slowly curved. With a smile in her eyebrows, she gently placed her hand on Chen Luo's right hand, her tone a little brisk. "Definitely." While Chen Luo and Chen Luo were going out on a date, on the other side was King Tiancheng. And this high school is also the school where Peter attends. As time passed, under Peter's nervous and expectant gaze, finally, the last class of the morning, the classroom practice class that he had prepared for a long time, finally began. "Okay, bit." On the podium, Vincent looked at the students below the stage, and a loud voice sounded. "I think everyone already knows about today's class. In this practical class, everyone can take turns to go on stage and give a 3-minute introduction to their auction items, and then the students in the audience will choose whether to bid to buy it. In the end, I will be the one to grade your performance and achievements. I hope everyone can achieve good results. Everyone should understand this rule, right? Then I won't say any more nonsense and let's get started now. Mitch, it's up to you to come first and let everyone see the results of your preparations these days." Under the podium, students came on stage one after another, showing off his auction items to everyone with a confident look on their faces. Looking at the things they took out, it was a dazzling array of things, and for a while, waves of exclamations continued to be heard in the classroom. Seeing everyone's display on the stage, Peter subconsciously touched his backpack, his face becoming unconfident again. Especially after he saw the next person appear and what he took out of his backpack, his anxiety reached its peak. Standing on the podium at this moment was a beautiful girl who looked young and beautiful, but also full of intellectual aura. Gwen Stacy. It has now been nearly 2 months since he started enrolling in school. During this period, Gwen was successfully elected as the monitor of her class by virtue of her beautiful appearance and her good grades, which ranked among the top 2 in her age group several times. In addition, she is also known as one of the 3 goddesses together with Mary Jane and Megan in the class, and is loved by countless people of the opposite sex. In the past 2 months, Peter has seen boys from other classes approaching each other under various excuses every day, and then confessing to them, but without exception, Gwen chose to refuse them all. Perhaps in terms of figure and sexiness, Gwen is not as attractive as the latter two, but her unique intellectual temperament gives her a different kind of charm, even if she is focused on studying. Peter couldn't help but feel good about him. But perhaps because of some inferiority complex in his heart, he has rarely communicated with the other party in the past 2 months. On the podium, Gwen took out the items from her backpack generously, placed them on the desk in front of her, and then began to introduce them. "Everyone, what I brought today is a signed basketball that I specially asked the Knicks star at the time to sign when I went to the Madison Arena with my father to watch the game when I was a kid." As soon as she said this, there was no need for her to say anything else, and there was an exclamation from the audience. Definitely, these were all sent by the male compatriots in the audience. In fact, they had already decided in their hearts that no matter what kind of auction their goddess would bring out later, they would try their best to take it. They did not expect that the other party would take it. The fact that what came out was such a precious thing immediately aroused their great interest. Even Harry, who had been sitting quietly next to Peter, did the same. Like everyone else, he was obviously very interested in this signed basketball and wanted to bid for it. But after thinking about it carefully, he chose 5.5 and gave up. What, Harry? Why don't you participate? I remember that you should really like watching basketball games, right? Feeling something unusual around him, Peter, who knew Harry's interests and hobbies well, couldn't help but look over with doubt in his eyes. I'm very interested. Harry nodded slightly, leaned into Peter's ear, and whispered, but I'm chasing Mary now. If she sees that I bought the monitor's auction, I'm afraid she will not happy. What? You and Mary? Peter's eyes widened subconsciously, filled with surprise. Sure. Keep your voice down. Harry made a silent gesture, and at the same time looked at the basketball in Gwen's hand on the stage, his eyes full of regret. But soon, when he looked at his best friend next to him again, suddenly, an idea quietly came to his mind. Chapter 222, Part 1. Harry's eyes lit up instantly, and he quickly came to Peter's side and whispered, Peter, let's discuss something. You can help me take a picture of that basketball. I'll give you the money later. So Mary won't know, right? After hearing what the other party said, Peter nodded clearly and understood what he was thinking. That's right. How about Peter? You can help me with this, right? As Harry spoke, he moved his eyes towards the podium. While the two were communicating, the shouts from the audience began to gradually decrease, and it seemed that the auction was about to come to an end. Harry was becoming more and more anxious. Peter subconsciously raised his head and glanced at Gwen's figure on the stage. His heartbeat accelerated slightly, and he became a little hesitant for a while. Seeing Peter's reaction, Harry couldn't help it. He quickly urged, Peter, are we good friends anymore? Why don't you do this for me? After Harry's 12 repeated urgings, Peter had no choice but to nod and agree. Seeing Peter finally nodding, Harry was overjoyed and hurriedly whispered, hurry up, otherwise the auction will end soon. I see. Peter raised his head, mustered up his courage, and slowly raised his right hand. His actions were also seen by Gwen on the podium. At that moment, Gwen smiled and asked Peter, then I don't know, classmate Peter, how much do you want to pay? This question stumped Peter. He didn't know much about this, so his eyes subconsciously moved to Harry beside him, with a questioning look in his eyes. Harry didn't dare to turn his head at this time, but he noticed that Mary's eyes were looking this way. It would be terrible if the other party saw something. However, he was not unresponsive. He hid his right hand under the table, spread his fingers, and gestured to Peter. Peter also noticed his movements. Looking at his 5 open fingers, he seemed to understand what his friend meant. He opened his mouth without thinking. 5,000 knives. Deathly silence. Just as Peter finished speaking, the classroom suddenly became silent. Everyone, including the teacher on the podium, stared at him blankly, their eyes filled with shock. After a while, when people finally came to their senses, the next moment, an uproar suddenly resounded throughout the classroom, and people's whispers continued to come from the audience. 5,000? Did I hear you correctly? How can Peter be so rich? I really didn't see it. I originally thought that only Harry's family could be so rich. Now it seems that there is a reason why they can play together. By the way, this is the first time I've discovered that Peter looks like he's really a master. What? You want to date him? What's wrong with that? I haven't dated a nerd yet. Seeing some girls in the classroom starting to look around at Peter, some boys suddenly couldn't sit still and said with disdain, I think you are overthinking. Maybe that Peter doesn't have much money at all. Why can he do this? Is it because he asked for such a high price because Harry helped him? That's right. I think that nerd must have a crush on Gwen, so he wants to use this method to attract her attention. If this is really the case, then his thinking is too simple. A goddess like Gwen will not fall in love with him for this reason. I think his thoughts are destined to be ruined. After hearing these words, the girl who had originally become interested in Peter immediately reacted. The light in her eyes gradually dimmed, and she regained her composure. That's right. Since Peter and Harry are good friends, it's not surprising that Harry would help. In this case, the reason why Peter dares to shout so loudly is because Harry is there to take care of it, right? I really envy him that he can make friends like Harry. Peter didn't hear these comments now, but looked at Harry with some doubts and gestures in his eyes. What, don't you want to find out the price? Harry instantly understood what he meant, rolled his eyes, and gestured in the same way. Idiot, didn't you pay attention to the price that other people shouted? You can win this basketball for only 500 at most, but luckily for you, your life has doubled again tenfold. What should we do? We can't go back on our word, right? Forget it, just 5,000. I can still afford this amount of money. Just when the two people made eye contact, Gwen's voice sounded again on the podium. Classmate Peter, I wonder if you called out the wrong price just now? How about you call out again? Hearing this, Peter instantly brightened up and was about to agree. However, when he saw Harry on the side making desperate gestures, he thought about it and finally gave up the idea. I'm sure. It's only 5,000, it won't change. But you. Seeing Peter's reaction, Gwen's face became anxious, and she was about to speak again to persuade her, but at this moment, she suddenly thought of something in her heart, and finally stopped the impulse in her heart, and gently he nodded and said nothing more. Everything went smoothly afterwards. After Peter's figure of 5,000 came out, no one else in the classroom continued to bid, and Gwen's auction came to an end. Although Gwen ostensibly no longer intends to persuade, she still doesn't want to see Peter spend such a high price, so she plans to find him alone after 407 has finished school, and then try to persuade him. As for why she didn't choose to speak just now, it was because she suddenly thought that if Peter changed his story in public, it might make him feel a little embarrassed. Therefore, in order to protect Peter's face, Gwen finally chose not to continue to persuade. Gwen's thoughts coincided with Harry's thoughts. As a truly rich second generation, $5,000 might be a huge sum of money to others, but it was not a huge amount of money to Harry. What, if he chooses to change his story for such a small amount of money, then Peter will be humiliated this time. Harry would not turn a blind eye to such a situation, so he hurriedly stopped Peter's movement. Seeing that this matter had finally come to an end, Harry finally breathed a sigh of relief. After this little episode, as the rest of the class came on stage one after another, finally, while Peter was waiting a little nervously, the teacher called his name. Next, Peter Parker. After hearing his name, Peter took a deep breath, and then with the encouragement of Harry beside him, he slowly stood up, picked up his school bag, and walked slowly towards the stage. Arriving at the podium, and immediately under the gaze of everyone, Peter braced himself, plucked up the courage, and took out the auction item he had prepared for this time from his bag. Chapter 223, Part 1. Just as he made a move, the whispers of everyone in the classroom came again. I want to see what good things he can come up with this time. Whether Peter is a second-generation rich man or not, you can tell just by looking at what he brings out. I can assure you, it won't be anything good. That goes without saying. Haven't you seen what Peter looks like in school? Does he look like a rich man? In the last few rows of the classroom, the boys who looked taller and dressed completely differently from good boys like Peter were whispering to each other. They looked at Peter, who was standing on the podium, with disdain in their eyes. Exactly. Did you just see that after the monitor persuaded him that he could requote, Peter obviously wanted to regret it. The reason why he refused in the end was because he didn't want to lose face in front of the monitor. If you say that, isn't Peter exaggerating? He spent an extra $5,000 just to save his face. When his parents find out when he comes home, they don't know how they will deal with him. As they finished speaking, the girls around these people who had originally said they wanted to date Peter also laughed softly in agreement and looked at Peter with faces that looked like they were watching a good show. But what they said was a coincidence. Gwen, who happened to be sitting not far away from them and had just sat down, listened attentively and turned her eyes to Peter on the podium. A trace of worry suddenly flashed in Gwen's eyes. Color. So, with the exception of a few people in the class, most of the people in the class looked amused. Peter bit the bullet, took out the things he had prepared from his school bag, and put them on the podium. Everyone, this is the auction item I prepared today. It is. Holding a thick notebook in his hand, Peter was about to introduce himself, but just as he opened his mouth, a voice came from the audience the next moment. Peter, the teacher has asked us to prepare for so many days. Are you just going to take out a notebook to fool the teacher? As soon as these words came out, there was a burst of laughter from the audience, and the group of boys at the end of the classroom spoke with mocking faces. It's just a broken notebook. You can get as much as you want in the shops outside. Are you going to put this thing up for auction? Peter, are you kidding us? And it looks like your laptop is still used, right? Don't be ridiculous. What's the use of this thing if we have it? Instead of buying this one from you, we might as well go to the store and buy a new one. Peter, I think you should come down. That's good. I bought your notebook, and I'll pay you $1. What do you think? Haha. Seeing the ridicule of everyone in the audience, Peter's expression on the podium suddenly became more and more embarrassed. He clutched the notebook in his hand tightly and lowered his head, as if he didn't know what to say. Fortunately, the teacher on the side finally couldn't stand it anymore, stood up to stop everyone's laughter, then turned around, looked at Peter with an encouraging face and said, Peter, don't worry about them. Just be yourself. The rest of this place will be left to you, come on. Hearing the teacher's encouragement, Peter finally cheered up slightly, nodded slightly, said thank you, and then mustered up the courage to face the audience and finally began to introduce his auction item. Everyone, the item I brought today, which is the notebook you see, is right what Greg said just now. It has indeed been used by me. It records what I have done for us in the past 2 months. All the knowledge points in the textbooks I have studied are summarized, and there are also some learning methods I summarized. Yes, after discussing with Chen Luo, and finally under Chen Luo's persuasion, Peter chose this notebook as his auction item this time. Maybe this notebook doesn't seem like much to Peter, and he doesn't even feel confident about putting this notebook up for auction, but in Chen Luo's opinion, the value of this notebook is very extraordinary. After all, This is the study summary of Peter, a top student, in the past 2 months. It contains all the content they need to learn at this age, and it even contains Peter's own learning methods. It is no exaggeration to say that if he gets with this notebook, as long as you can study according to the above content, it is not difficult to reach the top 10 in grade. And if it is obtained by a top student like Gwen, then she can even use the contents of this notebook to further improve her grades, and maybe she can also take this opportunity to reach the same level as Peter. It is also very possible. Although Gwen is also recognized as a top student in school, even she has to admit that her grades are still far behind Peter, who is the first in the grade. So if she can take this opportunity to get Peter's study notes, then come to think of it, she has no reason to refuse. When he decided to select this notebook as the auction item, Chen Luo had already analyzed it for Peter. This notebook, which is like an artifact, is only valuable in the eyes of those who truly know the goods. As for those guys who are not aware of the preciousness of this thing, they are simple-minded existences, so if they laugh at it, there is no need to take it to heart. It was precisely because he remembered Chen Luo's words and had unreserved trust in Chen Luo that Peter had the courage to continue introducing his auction. Even though there was still a lot of ridicule in the audience at this moment, he didn't pay attention at all. Sure enough, after hearing Peter's introduction, the ignorant people still burst into laughter, but when it comes to academics like Gwen, the reaction is completely different. Looking at the notebook in Peter's hand, Gwen had to admit that she was really moved. So far, this is the first time that she has the desire to raise her hand to participate in today's practical class. As a top student, she naturally understands how much help the notebook in Peter's hand can bring to her. If she can successfully obtain it, then it is really possible for her to catch up with Peter in terms of grades. At this thought, Gwen immediately planned to raise her hand to participate. I will pay 500,000. However, before she could say anything, another figure raised his hand first to grab the vote. Looking at the other person, Gwen narrowed her eyes slightly. She definitely knew the person who just spoke. Like Peter and herself, the other person was also a genuine top student. Although she was not as good as the two of them in terms of grades, she had never been ranked among the top 3 in the class, because she was not surprised at all that the other party recognized the value of Peter's notebook. As soon as he finished speaking, other students with excellent grades in the class also realized the value of this notebook. Their eyes lit up, and they all stood up to participate in the competition. I'll pay $70. I'll pay $90. I'll pay you $150. Looking at the scene of these top students competing for the title in front of them, the people in the back row of the classroom who were originally looking at the stage with mocking faces, who were planning to watch Peter's joke, were suddenly dumbfounded. Their eyes were straight, and their faces were full of fear. Believe. No. What's going on? Why are they all going crazy to grab such a broken notebook? Are they all insane? Do you think this thing is really worth fighting for? How can this be? Listening to the numbers coming from their ears getting higher and higher, several people looked at each other and could no longer laugh. Chapter 224, Part 1. On the other side, after seeing the scene in front of him, he was a little worried that the thing Peter brought out would not be sold. Harry, who was always ready to save the situation, was secretly relieved. While he was happy for his good brother, and also gave up the idea of taking action. Listening to the other people's bidding numbers getting higher and higher, Gwen began to secretly become anxious. As for the notebook that Peter took out, she was determined to get it. However, looking at the current situation, what made her a little embarrassed was that the money she had with her seemed to be a little insufficient. Even if she took out all of it, it would not be enough. Go up to the highest price ever shouted. What to do? Just when she was a little troubled, suddenly, when her peripheral vision subconsciously glanced at the signed basketball she was carrying, Gwen's eyes suddenly lit up and she had an idea in her mind. Quickly standing up, raising her right hand high, Gwen announced loudly, I will give you 5,000 knives. As soon as these words came out, the whole place fell into silence. Everyone in the classroom gradually opened their eyes, and their faces were suddenly filled with shock. No, did I hear it correctly? $5,000? Is Peter's notebook so valuable? Yes. Isn't it filled with gold? How could the monitor shout out such a price? Stupid. Have you forgotten that Peter 077 also shouted out $5,000 just now, and now the squad leader has also quoted this price? Don't the two cancel each other out? After such a reminder, everyone present suddenly realized. So that's it. In that case, the basketball the monitor took out and Peter's notebook are of equal value. So it's equivalent to an exchange between the two of them, and there's no need to spend any extra money, right? It turns out it can be like this. Then if we also find someone, then quote the same price to each other, and finally exchange directly, wouldn't that be okay too? Thinking of this, everyone's eyes suddenly lit up. Fortunately, this possibility was noticed by the teacher on the stage in time, and he quickly stood up and said, Everyone, this is a bug in this auction. After Peter's auction ends, others cannot use the same method again. Well, as soon as these words came out, everyone immediately let out a sigh of disappointment. On the podium, When he heard Gwen's quotation just now, Peter reacted immediately when he was stunned, and secretly praised Gwen's wit just now. Okay, I guess there should be no one else bidding anymore. The teacher turned to look at Peter and asked with a smile, "So, Peter, you should announce the results too." Peter came back to his senses, looked at Gwen who was smiling in the audience, subconsciously pushed up the glasses on the bridge of his nose, and nodded quickly. Okay. After completing the auction, Peter quickly walked down from the podium and returned to his seat to sit down. As soon as he sat down, Harry next to him touched his shoulder with a smile on his face and said teasingly, "Yes, you can. Peter, take this opportunity and contact the monitor as soon as possible. Maybe you can be together in the future." Woolen cloth? Hearing this, Peter looked embarrassed and said hurriedly, "No, Harry, you misunderstood. Come on." Before he finished speaking, Harry interrupted with a smile. "Don't tell me that you are not interested in the monitor. I'm not blind. You have secretly glanced at the monitor several times. You finally have this opportunity. Why don't you take advantage of it? I can tell you, this opportunity is rare, and you are both top students. As long as you successfully establish a connection, you will definitely spend a lot of time together in the future. In this way, you can show your talents in front of the monitor. There are more opportunities. Maybe you will really succeed in capturing the monitor's heart in the future." Listening to Harry's constant brainwashing next to him, Peter's heartbeat quickened instantly. He glanced cautiously at Gwen, who was not far away. With a slightly red face, he moved closer to Harry and asked in a low voice, "Harry, are you sure your method works?" "Don't worry." After hearing Peter's words, Harry immediately became energetic and patted his chest, his eyes full of confidence. "You may not know that this method was taught to me by Chen Luo. I listened to Chen Luo's advice at the beginning, and now you have seen the relationship between me and Mary. Maybe in less than a month, we can successfully be together." "Got it. Chen taught you this?" Peter stared. His face suddenly became dissatisfied, and he started to yell, "Why didn't he teach me? Isn't it because you only think about studying every day? In Chen's opinion, you don't seem to be interested in beautiful women. How can Chen teach you?" Harry rolled his eyes, looking at him helplessly.
This?
Upon hearing this reason, Peter smiled awkwardly and was unable to refute. "So remember, take this opportunity to build a good relationship with the squad leader. It's best if you can successfully get the squad leader's phone number in the first step." Harry, as someone who has experienced it, said to Peter with sincerity, "As long as you take the first step successfully, the road ahead will be much easier." "Yeah." Peter nodded repeatedly, keeping Harry's words in mind. Just after the two exchanged words, another figure came onto the podium. Looking at the objects the other person took out, Peter suddenly became interested, listening to the other party's story with some curiosity. On the podium at this moment, Sam Witwicky was standing there, holding a map that he found at home and showing it to everyone. "Everyone, this is a map left by my great-great-great-grandfather. Maybe you don't know that my great-great-great-grandfather was a famous explorer, Captain Archibald Witwicky. In fact, he was the first person in human history to explore the North Pole." Listening to Sam's narration on the stage, Peter, who has always been interested in these legendary stories, also listened very seriously, especially after hearing that his great-great-great-grandfather was the first human to explore the North Pole in history. His face became even more serious. It shows deep admiration. Perhaps because of his interest in this story, after seeing a pair of glasses with cracks on the lenses that Sam took out later, Sam's asking price was not low even for this pair of glasses, a full 50. The price of the knife was high, but Peter couldn't help but raise his hand and buy it. Fortunately, no one else was interested in this pair of tattered-looking glasses, so Peter successfully took the photo without competing with others. After class, Peter found Sam, and after clearing the money and goods, the pair of glasses finally fell into his hands. Looking at the glasses in his hand, Peter was looking at them with interest when a voice suddenly sounded from behind him. Chapter 225, Part 1. Peter. Behind Peter, Gwen's voice came. Hearing this voice, Peter came back to his senses instantly and quickly turned around to look. "Gwen-san. Just call me Gwen." With a sweet smile on his face, Gwen took out the basketball she had prepared long ago from her backpack and handed it to Peter. Here's the signed basketball you want worth $5,000. Peter was stunned when he heard this, smiled sheepishly, took the basketball with both hands, and explained in a low voice, "Actually, this is a misunderstanding. This basketball is what Harry wants, but I seem to have misunderstood what he meant." Then Peter told Gwen the true situation that had just happened between the two. After listening to his narration, Gwen suddenly smiled. "So that's it. I thought you were so crazy that you had to spend $5,000 to buy this basketball. My family doesn't have that much money. Even if I wanted it, I probably wouldn't be able to afford it." Peter scratched his head and smiled awkwardly. Hearing this, Gwen's heart moved, and her eyes when she looked at Peter suddenly became different. Among the boys he had come into contact with in the past, compared to them, Peter was a bit mediocre except for his grades, but he had a trait that Gwen especially admired: sincerity. This was the first time she had met someone like Peter who was so outspoken about his family. Even though the family situation was not very good, she could not see any uneasiness or embarrassment on Peter's face. She looked at Peter with this performance. Gwen couldn't help but look at him differently. In fact, a month ago, Peter was really not very willing to talk about his family in front of other people, but everything has changed since Chen Luo arrived. Because Peter grew up under the care of Mei alone since childhood, this single-parent family environment is also the main reason why Peter's character becomes more and more introverted. Even if Aunt Mei takes care of Peter on weekdays, there is one thing about her: I can't give it to you no matter what. And this kind of thing is father's love. The arrival of Chen Luo just made up for this. In the process of getting along with Chen Luo, Peter may not have felt anything at all, but the fact is that his personality has gradually changed from the introversion and closeness he had when he just entered high school to a confident and cheerful direction. In the past, if Gwen had taken the initiative to talk to him, Peter would have just stood there with a red face, not knowing what to say. But it's different now. After a slight change in his personality, Peter at the moment showed a special charm in Gwen's eyes. She unconsciously developed a good impression of him. Finally, after the two exchanged their lots, Gwen even offered to add Peter's contact information. After hearing what Gwen said, Peter was stunned at first, and then he felt happy. There was no reason to refuse. He nodded quickly and gave the other party his home phone number. Then let's stop talking here. See you tomorrow, Peter. After putting away the notebook handed over by Peter, Gwen waved to Peter with a smile on her face, then turned and walked out of the school gate. See you tomorrow? Peter shook his arms vigorously, the smile on his face completely undisguised. Even when he was walking with Harry on the way home from school, the smile on his face still hung on his face, with no intention of dissipating. Congratulations, Peter. Beside Peter, Harry kept tossing the basketball. He just got up and down, turning to look at Peter with a smile. It seems that you have successfully taken the first step. Moreover, it was the squad leader who took the initiative to exchange phone calls this time. It seems that you have great hopes. Really? Upon hearing this, Peter's eyes suddenly lit up and he asked quickly, Harry, tell me, now that this first step has been completed, what should I do next? Haha. Seeing the eager look on his friend's face, Harry laughed a few times, stretched out his hand to pat the other person's shoulders, and said jokingly, I didn't expect that Peter would be so anxious. It seems like you would be so anxious. You kid doesn't only have study in mind. Seeing Harry shaking his head and lamenting, Peter rolled his eyes and said helplessly, Hey, are you done? Do you want to tell me the way? If not, I'll ask Chen. Really? After hearing this, Harry not only did not restrain himself, but laughed even louder, looked at him with a half-smile and said, I really don't believe you would ask Chen this question. Could it be that you just aren't you afraid that Aunt Mei will find out? As soon as these words came out, Peter's face froze and he was speechless. The reason why he didn't think of asking Chen about these things was because he was most worried about this. If Aunt Mei found out, how might she nag him? Thinking of this, Peter couldn't help but have a headache. Seeing Peter's distressed look, Harry stopped teasing him and said, Please give me flowers. Okay, don't worry about this. I advise you to go to Chen and ask. At the beginning, Chen told me that when it comes to chasing girls, you need to know how to prescribe the right medicine. Gwen and Mary have different personalities and hobbies, so either method may not be suitable for you, and I'm afraid it won't be helpful to tell you. As for Mei, you don't have to worry. When I told Chen about this, Chen promised me that he would never tell my father about this. I think it will be the same this time. Is that so? Upon hearing this, Peter's eyes suddenly lit up, and a trace of anticipation surged in his heart. If possible, he would definitely want to ask Chen Luo. Since he doesn't have to worry about the risks on Mei's side, that would be the best. As soon as he thought about this, his desire to go home quickly became even stronger. After walking out of the school gate and saying goodbye to Harry, Peter also quickened his pace and walked towards home. What he didn't know was that at the moment behind him, a Camaro with yellow and black lines all over it and a streamlined body, but it looked a little old, followed him slowly and slowly, driving slowly towards Peter's house. Because Peter was walking on the street, cars were passing by and pedestrians were walking in a hurry, so the movements of the Camaro did not attract the attention of the surrounding pedestrians at all. This is especially true for Peter. After all, he is still thinking about how to talk to Chen Luo about this matter when he returns home. His whole mind is focused on Gwen, and his heart is full of tension and expectation. In such a mood, he didn't bother to pay attention to the movement behind him. But at the moment, if someone looks carefully, they will find that there is no one in the driver's seat inside the Camaro, except that the steering wheel is turning slightly, and some noisy sounds are heard from the car's stereo from time to time. It looks extremely weird. Following Peter's pace all the way, the Camaro finally stopped slowly not far from Peter's house. But Peter still knew nothing about all this. When he got home, Peter immediately shouted loudly, I'm back. Putting down his school bag, a somewhat impatient Peter immediately walked towards the kitchen without thinking. wanting to ask Chen Luo for advice. However, when he came to the kitchen, looking at the empty scene in the kitchen, Peter was dumbfounded for a moment, scratching his head in confusion, his eyes full of confusion.